Most reincarnations show up humble. This breast milk-loving maniac flew through the Hokage's window, lasered his entire security team, poured himself a glass of breast milk at the man's desk, and said, "I can do whatever the fuck I want." He ripped a man's spine out before lunch. Konoha thought they had a problem child. They had a god, and gods don't follow rules.
He opened his eyes inside the orphanage crib and remembered everything. He remembered the lab. He remembered the white coats. He remembered the milk and the betrayal of the milk and the way the woman who had been paid to mother him would flinch when his eyes started to glow. He remembered being Homelander. He remembered dying with a son's name in his throat and a country burning beneath him. Then he remembered being born again, smaller, weaker for now, with red marks on his cheeks and a fox stitched into his belly. The infant did the math. The infant smiled. Across the village, in a sealed cage of hatred and ink, a beast that had eaten armies tried to roar and found that no sound came out. Kurama, the Nine-Tails, the oldest and proudest of the Biju, pressed against the bars of his prison and felt something he had never felt before. He felt watched. By his own host. By a passenger inside the boy's skull that had nothing to do with him. The fox tried to push chakra outward. The boy did not need it. The fox tried to push fear inward. The boy laughed in his crib. That was year one. By the time Naruto Uzumaki was 4 years old, he had tested the limits of his second body in the woods outside the village, and the results pleased him. His skin still bounced kunai. His eyes still burned. His ears still picked up heartbeats from a kilometer away. Whatever this world was, whatever god or demon had pushed him through that doorway between lives, they had done it without taking anything from him. The fox in his belly was a bonus he could ignore. The little Uzumaki body would grow into something that could fly and bleed nothing and end whoever it wanted to end. He played the part. He grinned wide for old men. He cried fat tears when the matron pinched him. He let the village stare. He let them whisper. He let them think they understood the orange-blooded thing in their gutter. He was 6 years old the first time one of them tried to put him down. The man was a chunin coming off a long week of D-ranks and a bottle of plum wine. He saw the boy walking home alone from a stand that sold dumplings. The shinobi was small and the boy was smaller, and the alley was empty, and the night had eaten the lanterns. The chunin pulled a kunai out of his vest. His pulse went up. Naruto heard it from 20 meters away and slowed his step on purpose. The chunin stepped behind him. He raised the blade. He brought it down at the soft spot between the boy's shoulder blades. The kunai bent. It bent the way a spoon bends in a cartoon, folded backward against itself, the steel curling around the boy's skin like the boy was the harder thing in the alley. The chunin made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a question. He stared at the ruined weapon in his hand. He did the only thing he could think to do, which was to try a second time, and a third, and a fourth, until the blade snapped and clattered onto the stones. Naruto turned around slowly. He was holding a paper container of dumplings in one hand. His other hand came up and closed around the man's wrist and squeezed. The chunin's wrist popped like a bundle of sticks. He went to one knee. He started to scream. Naruto put his free hand over the man's mouth and pressed, just a little, and the screaming stopped because the lower half of the chunin's face was no longer a working part of his body. Naruto picked the man up off the ground by the collar and held him at eye level, the way an adult holds a doll up to a child to ask if she likes it. "Hi," Naruto said brightly. "I'm 6. His eyes started to glow. The chunin had time to understand what was about to happen. He had time to thrash. He had time to weep through the wreck of his face. None of it helped him. The heat vision came out as 2 thin red lines, and they walked across the man's eye sockets and through his brain and out the back of his skull and into the wall behind him, where they made a neat double hole that smoked for a long moment after. Naruto set the body down against the wall. He picked up the dumplings he had dropped. One had rolled into a puddle. He ate it anyway. He chewed slowly. He looked up at the moon. He felt something he did not have a word for in either of his lives. Something that sat somewhere between satisfaction and homecoming. He remembered the woman in the lab. He remembered the warm bottle. He remembered the only thing that had ever quieted his head. He needed to find a wet nurse. The next morning, a Chunin was found dead in an alley with 2 cauterized holes through his head. The Hokage was informed. The Hokage looked at the report for a long minute. He set it down on his desk. He asked the Anbu what the boy had been doing the night before. The Anbu said the boy had been at the dumpling stand. The Hokage closed his eyes and asked nothing further. By age 7, Naruto had a wet nurse on payroll. Her name was Hina. She was a widowed civilian, 24 years old, with a baby of her own and a small house at the edge of the village. She had buried her husband during the QB attack and could not afford the rent on her plot of dirt. A man with golden hair and red marks on his cheeks knocked on her door one evening and offered her more Rio per week than her dead husband had ever made in a year. She accepted before she understood what she had accepted. The arrangement was simple on paper. He came once a day. He sat at her kitchen table. She filled a clean glass flask. He drank from it. He paid her in cash. He left. The first time he came, he was 7 years old. The first time he came, he sat across from her with his small hands folded on the wood and watched her with eyes that did not match the rest of his face. She had seen children grieve. She had seen them rage. She had never seen a child look at her the way he looked at her, like a man returning to a thing he had already been promised by the world and was only here to collect. She poured the milk. She set it down in front of him. He picked up the flask. He held it with both hands. He smiled. The smile cracked his face open into something younger than 7, something that could have been 3, something that was not even from this world. He drank slowly. His eyes closed. His shoulders settled. His feet, which had been a few inches off the chair the entire time, came down onto the rung of the chair like the body had finally found gravity. He set the flask down. He wiped his upper lip with his thumb. He sighed. "Thank you, Hina," he said with the voice of a kind old man. Then he paid her 3 months of rent in cash and walked out into the night. She watched him go. She locked the door. She crossed herself in front of a shrine she had not used since her husband had been alive. She slept that night with her baby pressed to her chest and a kunai under her pillow, and the absolute knowledge that something had moved into her kitchen, and that the only safe choice she had now was to keep pouring. He came every evening for the next 5 years. The academy took him at 8. He attended in the mornings. He sat in the back. He drew on his desk. He answered when called on with the bored, half-right answers of a child who had decided to be unimpressive on purpose. Iruka Umino hated him for the first month and pitied him for the second and worried about him from the third onward, because there was something behind the boy's blue eyes that did not belong in a classroom. Iruka had been a Chunin for years. He had killed men. He knew the look of someone who had also killed men. He saw it in the back of his classroom every day, sitting behind a small desk, wearing an orange jumpsuit, drawing a stick figure with red eyes onto the wood. Iruka kept his mouth shut. He had a wife now. He had a child on the way. There were things in the village that a Chunin did not poke. Sasuke Uchiha was in the same class. So was Sakura Haruno. So was every other future genin of the supposed Rookie 9. They learned to recognize the silence around the Uzumaki kid in the back. They learned not to bump his elbow during lunch. Sasuke alone tried to test him once, in a sparring match in the 3rd year, when his grief was still raw and his mouth was sharper than his sense. He came at Naruto with the textbook Uchiha interceptor stance, hand at the hip, ready to deliver the lesson he had inherited from a dead older brother. Naruto stepped to the side. Sasuke went past him. Sasuke turned. Naruto was already in front of him again. Sasuke went past him a second time. The 3rd time Sasuke turned, Naruto was holding his collar with 2 fingers, lifting him so that his sandals dragged the dirt of the training ring. Naruto leaned in close. He grinned. He spoke softly enough that the watching classmates could not hear. "I will let you live, little brother, because someday I will need someone smart and angry to stand to my left. But if you ever come at me again before I tell you to, I will pop your head between my hands like a melon. Nod if you understand." Sasuke nodded. He could not have done anything else if he had wanted to. Naruto set him down. He patted him on the shoulder. He walked to the edge of the ring and called the spar a draw. Iruka did not argue. Sakura, watching from the side, blushed without understanding why she was blushing. The memory would stay with her for years, and she would never quite forgive herself for the way her body had reacted before her mind had finished processing what she had seen. That was the academy. The graduation exam came when Naruto was 12. He did the bare minimum. He performed a transformation. He performed a clone. He failed the substitution on purpose because failing the substitution let him stay near Iruka for an extra hour, and he liked Iruka in the way a wolf likes a deer it has chosen not to eat yet. He took the leaf headband. He tied it around his forehead. He wore it for one day. By the second day, news reached him that changed his afternoon. Danzo Shimura had decided to act. The old Warhawk had been watching the Uzumaki boy for years. He had read the field reports, the bent kunai, the chunin in the alley, the whispers from teachers about the silence of the boy in the back of the room. Danzo had not built Konoha's shadow with feelings. He had built it with leverage and conditioning and a brand of ink on the tongues of the brave. The Nine-Tails Jinchuriki was a weapon. Weapons that walked around with their own personalities were inefficient. Danzo had a chamber under the village where personalities went in and obedience came out. He had decided that the boy was overdue for processing. 40 root Anbu were dispatched. The order was simple: subdue, transport, condition. Use lethal force only as a last resort. The boy would be useful. They came to Naruto on the road home from the academy. They were quick, they were good. 2 of them dropped from the trees with paralysis tags. 3 more swept in from the alley behind him. The remaining 35 formed a perimeter through the rooftops and the stone underneath the street, sealing the area off with prepared barrier markers laid down weeks in advance. The last thing Naruto felt as a free citizen of the Hidden Leaf was a paper tag pressed against the back of his neck, and the smell of someone's masked breath, and the sense that several someones around him were ready to bleed him if he flinched. He could have killed every one of them in that moment. He chose to play along. He went limp. He let his eyes roll back. He let them carry him down. He let them strap him to a steel chair in a chamber of seal-marked stone 3 stories beneath the Hokage monument. He let them pour the conditioning oil over the seals on his wrists. He kept his pulse low and his breathing even, and his heat vision banked, because he wanted to see who was in the room with him before he started the show. The chamber filled with men, 40 of them, masked, armed. The best Root had to offer. Operatives whose names had been erased before he was born, men who had killed Kaji-level threats with a kunai and a piece of wire. They formed a ring around him with weapons drawn. Behind a one-way wall of obsidian glass, the shape of an old man with a bandaged arm and one good eye stood very still and waited for the show. Danzo Shimura had spent his life moving carefully through the cracks of his village. He had survived the First War, the Second War, the Third War, the Kyuubi attack, the Uchiha massacre, and 3 different attempts on his life by his own colleagues. He believed himself to be the unseen pillar holding up the will of fire, and the boy in the chair was a load-bearing tool he had been waiting 12 years to install. The boy in the chair opened his eyes. The boy in the chair smiled. The boy in the chair lifted off the seat. The leather restraints around his wrists and ankles popped like wet paper. The seal markings on the floor flickered and went out the way a lamp goes out when somebody walks past it without looking. He floated up to a height where the toes of his sandals were even with the eyes of the closest Root agent. His hair drifted around his face. His blue irises lit from within, and a dull red began to pour out around the edges. And the temperature of the chamber rose by 10 degrees in 3 seconds. Naruto Uzumaki spoke for the first time since they had taken him. "I will laser you. God damn it. I will laser every fucking one of you." He did not warn them twice. He did not wait for them to brace. The first beam came out at full output and walked through the front rank of Root operatives at chest height, and the bodies in the front rank came apart at the sternum and dropped to the floor as separate pieces. Steam rolled off the wound channels. Blood that should have hit the ground hit the air first and turned to a copper fog. 2 of the men in the front rank had been mid-jutsu when the cut went through them. Their hands kept moving for half a second after their torsos had already separated. The chakra in the hands seals fizzling out into nothing as the brain that had been ordering them ceased to exist. The men in the second rank tried to raise barriers. He swept his head sideways. The beams cut through the barriers like they were rice paper, and through the men behind them, and through the stone wall behind those men, and into a corridor where 2 more root operatives were running for backup. He found those 2 through the wall with X-ray vision and adjusted the angle of his head by half an inch and put a hole through both of them at the base of the skull from 40 meters away. A man behind him threw a wind blade at the back of his neck. The wind blade struck him and broke. The man behind him drew a sword. Naruto did not turn. He raised his right arm backward and pointed 2 fingers behind his shoulder, and his pupils contracted, and a thinner, hotter beam of red light came out of his eye, ricocheted off his own raised fingernail like a mirror, and went through the swordsman's left eye and the back of his skull. The man dropped. The sword clanged on the stone. 2 operatives at the rear of the chamber tried to flee through a sealed door. He saw their fear pulses through the wall. He saw their breath. He saw the way their hands fumbled at the latch. He swept his gaze in their direction, and the beam came through the wall and through them, and through the door and through the corridor behind that, and through a man who had just been arriving to see what the noise was. 20 seconds in, half the room was dead. The remaining men panicked in the way that only people who have spent their whole lives being told they could not panic could panic. They came at him from 3 sides at once. He met them in the air. He moved through them with his hands at his sides, faster than their eyes could track, moving in straight lines from one body to the next. And where his shoulder clipped a man, the man came apart. Where his elbow grazed a chest plate, the chest plate folded inward, and the ribs folded with it, and the lungs collapsed, and the man was on the floor before his colleagues understood that he had been hit. A Jonin-grade root captain, a man who had killed an Iwakage candidate in the last war, flickered behind Naruto with a blade aimed at the kidney. Naruto turned with him. He caught the captain's wrist. He squeezed. The bones of the wrist liquefied inside the skin. The captain made a sound that did not have a name. Naruto leaned in close and put his free hand on the back of the man's neck and pressed his palms together with the captain's head between them. The skull burst with a wet pop. The body fell. He turned. There were 6 of them left. They had stopped attacking. They had backed against the far wall. One of them was openly weeping behind his mask. One of them had soiled his uniform. One of them, the youngest, was holding his blade out in front of him with both hands, the way a child holds a stick against a thunderstorm. Naruto floated to the center of the room. He looked at them with a thoughtful expression, the way a man looks at a piece of trash and decides whether the bin is worth walking to. Down, he said. They went down. They went face first onto the stone in front of him. They put their foreheads on the floor. They did the only thing that the conditioning of their lives had left them capable of, which was obey. He lasered them anyway. He did it from above, 6 clean shots from a hovering position, 1 for each. The bodies twitched once and went still. He did not feel anything for them. They had come into his afternoon with chains. He had answered with himself. The math was even. Behind the obsidian wall, Danzo Shimura was already moving. Izanagi was in his right eye, primed and ready, the eye stitched into his arm carrying the secondary charge. He had seen enough. He understood now that he had badly misjudged the situation. He had a tunnel out of the chamber prepared. He had a Phoenix Hawk summoning ready. He had a contingency with one of the Akatsuki rings stored in a drawer in his office, 2 floors above. He needed to get to that drawer. He turned and started to move toward his exit. The obsidian wall came apart around him. Naruto walked through it without slowing down. The wall was 3 feet thick, reinforced with 7 layers of paper seals from the founding of the village. The boy walked through it the way a man walks through a beaded curtain. The fragments of obsidian fell around him like glass in a dream. He landed on the stone floor on the other side and looked at the old warhawk, and his eyes were bright and his smile was small and his breathing was even. "You watched the whole time," Naruto said. Danzo's right hand came up. The Sharingan in his arm flared. He summoned a wind blade between his fingers and threw it with all the force of a war veteran's chakra reserves. The blade hit Naruto's chest and broke against it like a wave breaking against a cliff. Naruto did not move. He looked down at the spot where the blade had hit. He brushed nothing off the fabric. He looked back up. Danzo activated Izanagi. He flickered. He died once and came back. He was 4 feet to the left of where he had been before, behind a pillar, with a sword in his hand and a hawk summoning forming over his shoulder, and the second Sharingan in his arm preparing to fire a Kodoa Matsukami at the boy across the room. Naruto was already behind him. He did not move at a speed that anyone in the room had time to process. He simply was on the other side of the pillar, with one hand resting on Danzo's shoulder, and the other hand cocked back at hip level. "Hi," he said brightly. His fist went through Danzo's back. It went through the spine, and through the heart, and out the front of the chest plate. And the fingers on the front side opened and closed once around the spine, like they were testing the grip on a tool. Then the fingers tightened. Then the arm pulled back. The spine came with the arm. It came out of Danzo Shimura's body in a long, ragged ribbon of bone and meat, and the hawk summoning above the old man's shoulder dispersed into smoke before it had finished forming Hall. Because there was no longer a man to channel it, Naruto dropped the spine on the stone. It landed with a sound that was nothing like the sound of a body. Danzo collapsed forward against the pillar and slid down it in pieces. The remaining Sharingan in his arm flickered for a half second and went dark. Naruto landed slowly in the spreading pool of blood. He straightened his jacket collar. He looked at the corridor full of cooked meat and folded armor. He let the silence settle. "You guys are the real heroes." He walked out of the chamber. He took the stairs. He emerged into the village at street level through a ventilation shaft that came up behind a flower stall. The flower lady was watering her azaleas. He walked past her with blood on his sleeves and the smell of cooked uniform on his clothes. She looked at him. She did not move. He gave her a small, polite smile. He kept walking. Inside the seal on his belly, the Ninetales was upright in his cage for the first time in 12 years. The fox was looking at the ceiling of his prison, the way a prisoner looks at the ceiling of a cell when something in the next room has stopped screaming. He had felt the chakra in the underground chamber. He had felt 40 lives end one after another. He had felt the boy walk through the obsidian wall. He had felt the boy tear the spine out of an old man without any of the boy's own chakra leaving the boy's body. The fox lay back down. He put his head on his paws. He did the thing that he had never in his 1,000-year life thought he would do, which was hope very, very hard that the boy in front of his cage would forget that he existed. Naruto Uzumaki, age 12, walked home with blood on his clothes. He bathed. He changed. He went to Hina's house. He sat at her kitchen table. He drank from his flask. He paid her in cash. He went to bed early. He slept the sleep of the just. In the morning, he flew through the window of the Hokage Tower. He did not knock. He did not wait. He came through the glass and the wooden frame of the third-floor window in a single rising arc, dust and splinters trailing behind him, and he hovered above Sarutobi Hiruzen's desk with his hands in the pockets of his jacket and the morning light behind him. The third Hokage had been signing a mission scroll. The brush stilled in his hand. He looked up over the rim of his hat. His pulse went up by 10 beats per minute and stayed there. Embu dropped from seals in the ceiling and the walls. 5 of them. They were the Hokage's personal guard, the captain among them, a man who had served the Yondaime in the last war. They had their blades drawn before their feet hit the floor. Naruto's eyes flicked toward each of them. His X-ray vision had already mapped them through the walls before he had ever come through the window. He had counted them on his way up the stairs of the tower. He had counted the ones in the side corridor. He had counted the 2 in the basement. He had counted the 5 reserve operatives on the rooftop across the street. He had counted the sniper in the bell tower 3 blocks east. He fired 5 beams at once, in 5 different directions, through the walls. The Anbu in front of him did not get to swing. They came apart at the chest in mid-leap, their armor opening around the cauterized wound channels, the blades in their hands clattering onto the wooden floor before their bodies did. The 2 in the basement fell with their heads removed at the jawline. The 5 on the rooftop across the street toppled into each other in a heap. The sniper in the bell tower slumped forward against his window. None of them had finished crossing the distance to draw breath. The 3rd Hokage sat very still behind his desk. Naruto reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He produced a slim, polished flask, the kind a man might carry brandy in. The flask was warm. He had filled it 40 minutes ago at Hina's kitchen table. He poured a careful glass. He had a glass with him, of course, a small crystal one. And he set the flask down on the Hokage's desk next to a stack of unsigned mission reports. He sipped, his eyes closed, his shoulders settled. He held the milk in his mouth for a long moment, the way a sommelier holds a wine before he swallowed. He wiped his upper lip with his thumb and smiled the smile of a child who had just been kissed on the forehead by his mother. He opened his eyes. He looked at Hiruzen. He looked very, very pleased with himself. The 3rd Hokage was a man who had lived through 3 wars and the death of his wife and the murder of his successor and the loss of half his students to the world. He had seen Genjutsu masters rip men's minds to pieces. He had seen Orochimaru turn his own students into experiments. He had seen the Nine Tails in person twice with all of its teeth. He had never seen anything as wrong as the boy in front of him drinking that glass. "Naruto," he said, very evenly. "What is this?" Naruto set the glass down. He floated a little lower so that his sandals were just above the desk. He crossed his arms. He tilted his head. "I'm done playing ninja, old man. I am the upgrade. You work for me now." Hiruzen put his hands flat on the desk. He spoke the words he had been rehearsing in the back of his mind ever since the first Chunin had been found dead in an alley with 2 cauterized holes through his head 6 years ago. "This is madness, Naruto. The will of fire is older than you. It is larger than you. It will outlast you. The village is not yours to take. The seat of Hokage is earned. You are a child. You have killed men in a chamber, but you have not earned this office, and I will not surrender it to a tantrum." Naruto listened to the whole speech. He nodded along like a polite student. When the old man finished, Naruto smiled again and said, "Okay." Then he crossed the desk in one step. He took the 3rd Hokage by the throat with one hand and lifted him out of his chair. The old man weighed nothing. The hat fell off his head. The pipe tumbled from his fingers and rolled across the desk and over the edge. Hiruzen reached for chakra. He had his adamantine staff jutsu primed. He had Unma's seal already half formed in his palm. He had a contingency in his sleeve that would have given Orochimaru himself a hard afternoon. Naruto did not give him time to use any of it. He went up. He did not go up like a man jumping. He went up like a missile. He punched through the ceiling of the office and through the 2nd floor of the Hokage Tower and through the roof and through the cloud cover and through the upper layers of the air, and the village shrank beneath them, and the wind tore at the old man's robes, and the cold came on, and the cold came on harder. And Hiruzen Sarutobi felt his lungs begin to refuse the work of breathing. They went past the level where birds flew. They went past the level where weather lived. They went up to a place where the sky was almost black, and the curve of the land of fire could be seen below them, gray and green and small, with the clouds beneath their feet. Naruto held the Hokage out at arm's length. The old man's eyes were rolling back. His skin was blue at the lips. "Look at it, Hokage-sama," Naruto said gently. "Look at how far we are from anything. There are no shinobi up here. There are no jutsu up here. There is nothing the will of fire can do for you up here. Do you understand?" He let go. The old man fell. He fell for a long time. The wind ripped his hat away. His robes flapped uselessly. His brain, starved of oxygen, spun through every face he had ever loved. His wife, his son, his student Minato, his student Tsunade, his student Jiraiya, his student Orochimaru. And he tried to channel the chakra to slow himself. And his chakra was too thin in the cold air, and the seals would not form, and the ground was coming up faster than thinking. A hand closed around his collar 300 meters above the rooftops. He stopped. He swung. The hand belonged to Naruto, who had passed him on the way down and was now flying upward against his fall, holding the 3rd Hokage like a kitten by the scruff. Naruto looked at him with the expression of a parent who had let a toddler reach the edge of the stairs and then caught him. "There you go," Naruto said. "That's better." He flew them down to the roof of the Hokage Tower. He set the old man on his feet. Hiruzen's knees gave out. Naruto caught him by the shoulder. He patted him twice. He smoothed out the front of the old man's robes. He picked up the Hokage hat, which had landed on a chimney 3 meters away, and dusted it off and set it back on Hiruzen's head. "Position still yours," Naruto said. "Title and everything. You sign the papers. You smile for the council. You meet the foreign envoys. You wear the hat. You do the boring stuff. I do the thinking." Hiruzen's voice came out as a rasp. "And if I refuse?" "You won't," Naruto said pleasantly. "You're a smart man." Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at the boy in front of him. He looked at the village beneath them. He looked at the bodies of his Anbu through the broken roof. He thought about his grandson, asleep in a small house at the edge of the academy district. He thought about Konohamaru, who would grow up in whatever world Hiruzen left behind for him. He bowed his head. "What do you want?" he said. "For now, nothing big," Naruto said. "Just don't put up a fight when I make my picks for the team. I'm building something. Don't get in the way and you live forever, old man." The third Hokage closed his eyes. The third Hokage agreed. The next morning, the village woke up to the news that the third Hokage had announced a new special operations unit. It would answer directly to the Hokage's office. It would be led by the prodigy Uzumaki Naruto, a fresh genin whose performance at the academy had, the announcement said, been hiding the talents of a generational shinobi. The unit would be called the Seven, after the founding council of the village's earliest war years, and it would consist of 7 hand-picked operatives drawn from the rookie classes and the existing Chunin pool. The selection had already been made. The names were posted at noon on the front of the Hokage Tower. The names were Uzumaki Naruto, Captain, Uchiha Sasuke, Hyuga Neji, Nara Shikamaru, Hatake Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, Inuzuka Kiba. The civilian council met an emergency session at 1. The Shinobi Council met an emergency session at 1:30. The Hokage, behind a closed door, signed every paper that was put in front of him. The signing took an hour. The complaints took 6. The Hokage said very little. He smoked his pipe. He listened. He nodded at the right times. He went home that night and held his grandson in his arms and did not sleep. The 7 gathered for the first time at sundown on the roof of the Hokage Tower, where Naruto had told them to be. He arrived last. He came up over the edge of the building floating because he liked the visual and because he wanted them to see him arrive from a direction that did not come with stairs. He stopped about a meter above the surface of the roof and let his sandals settle without quite touching down. He looked at each of them in turn. Sasuke Uchiha stood with his arms folded, eyes hooded, jaw set. He had been informed of his selection that morning. He had not been asked. He had walked to the meeting because he had been told to, and because he remembered very well what it had felt like to be lifted off the ground by his collar at age 10 in a sparring ring. He was here. He hated that he was here. He would figure out what to do with that hate later. Hyuga Neji stood with his hands at his sides, his Byakugan active. He had been studying the boy in front of him for the entire walk up the stairs. He could see chakra. He had always been able to see chakra. He was looking at Naruto Uzumaki now, and he could see chakra in every one of the others on this rooftop, and he could see absolutely none in the boy floating above the tile. He could see the boy's body. He could see the seal on his stomach and the great red presence behind it. He could not see anything connecting the two. The boy was a body without a network. The boy was a black hole shaped like a child. Neji had been raised to believe that fate was a current and that all men were leaves on it. He was looking now at something that was not a leaf, and the not being a leaf was so total that it broke his understanding of the word current. Shikamaru Nara stood with his hands in his pockets and his mind running at 4 times its normal speed. He had been asked for this assignment in writing by the Hokage himself, with the seal of the office, and the request had been delivered to his father. His father had told him that he could refuse, and that the refusal would probably end with his father dying in an unfortunate accident within the week. Shikamaru had said yes without any further questions. He was looking at Naruto Uzumaki now, and his brain was already 10 steps ahead of his face. He had seen the bodies of the Anbu pulled out of the Hokage Tower the previous afternoon. He had counted the cauterized holes. He had measured the angles. He had run the numbers. The numbers said that the boy in front of him was beyond the reach of conventional shinobi response. The numbers said that the only viable strategy in a room with this boy was compliance, until the day that compliance failed, at which point the only remaining strategy was death. Shikamaru had decided, walking up the stairs, that he would prefer compliance. Hatake Kakashi stood at the back of the group with one eye on his book and one ear on the conversation. He was smiling under the mask. The smile was a habit. He had killed a man named Rin many years ago through a hand he could not control. He had buried 2 students. He had buried a teacher. He had decided, the moment the assignment had landed on his door, that the boy at the center of this assignment was going to either be the death of him or the most interesting thing that had happened to him since the Yondaime had died. Kakashi was here for either outcome. The book in his hand was already at chapter 4. Yuhi Kurenai stood with her arms crossed and her genjutsu chakra primed. She had not been allowed to refuse either. She had a man she loved in this village. She had a future she was trying to build. She was not going to throw any of it away in a moment of pride. She would do this assignment. She would do it well. She would survive it. She had decided this on the way over, and she was sticking to the decision. Inuzuka Kiba stood near the front of the group with Akamaru on his shoulder, and the kind of grin on his face that had gotten him in trouble for as long as he had been able to grin. He had not been afraid of the new captain. He had not really believed any of the rumors. He was an Inuzuka. He had a battle-trained dog and an animal nose and a body bred for combat. He was a clan kid who had failed to outgrow the part of him that thought clan kids could not be touched. Naruto floated to the center of the roof. He hovered above the tile. He looked at each of them. He smiled. He spread his hands. "Welcome to the 7, he said. "I think we're going to have some fun." Kiba snorted. It was a small, ugly sound. It was the kind of sound a teenager makes when a teacher he hates says something he thinks is stupid. Naruto's eyes flicked to him. "Got something on your mind, Kiba?" he said pleasantly. "Yeah, I do," Kiba said, with the volume turned all the way up, because he had decided on the way to the roof that the only way to deal with this whole situation was to set the tone early. "I think this whole thing's a joke. I think you're a weirdo who killed some old men in a basement, and now you think you're a Kage. I think you're a freak, dude. Everybody in this village knows it. We just don't say it because the old man told us not to." The roof went very, very still. Sasuke turned his head a quarter inch in Kiba's direction. Shikamaru closed his eyes. Kakashi turned a page in his book. Kurenai's lips parted around a word she did not get to speak. Neiji's Byakugan flickered. Akamaru, on Kiba's shoulder, let out a small, low whine and pressed himself flat against his master's neck. Naruto smiled wider. It was a terrible smile. It was a wide, warm, genuine, friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who had just been told a joke he had been waiting to hear his whole life. It cracked his face open in a way that made every other person on the roof take half a step back, except for Kiba, who was still committed to his bit. "Wow," Naruto said. "Brave." He floated forward. He came down to roof level. His sandals touched the tile for the first time. He walked across the roof at a normal walking pace toward Kiba. Kiba's grin flickered. "Look, Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. He did it gently. He did it the way an older brother puts a hand on a younger brother's shoulder. His other hand came up and ruffled Kiba's hair. He was smiling. He was warm. Kiba's shoulders started to relax. Kiba's grin started to come back. Kiba was already convincing himself that the whole tension of the moment had been in his head, and that the new captain was just a guy, and that a roof was a roof and a team was a team, and Inuzuka kids could not be touched. Then Naruto clapped his hands over Kiba's ears. He used the full output of his super strength. The sound was a single dry crack, like a rifle shot, like a pane of glass under a hammer. Kiba's head jerked. His knees folded. He hit the roof tiles with both hands clamped over the sides of his head, and his eyes rolling and his mouth open in a scream that none of them could hear, because Kiba's eardrums were no longer working. Blood ran down his jaw. Blood ran out of both nostrils. Blood ran out of the corners of his eyes. Akamaru was on the tile beside him, whining, pawing at his master, smelling the wrongness coming off him. Kiba was screaming. The scream had no words. It was the sound of an animal that had been changed, in a single second, from something that could hear into something that could not. His balance was gone. His left ear was pouring blood onto the tile. He tried to push himself up and went sideways and went down again. He stayed down. He clutched his head. He wept. Naruto looked at him for a long moment with an expression that did not quite have a name. It was the expression of a man watching an insect on its back. He did not look away. He let the seven watch him watch it. Then he turned his head to the rest of them. Sasuke had gone very still. Neji had turned his Byakugan off. Shikamaru had moved his hands a little further into his pockets. Kakashi had lowered his book. Kurenai was breathing through her nose. Naruto smiled at them. The smile was warm. The smile said, "None of you are next, and also, all of you could be." "I'm the Homelander," he said, "and I can do whatever the fuck I want." He let the silence hold. He let it sit there with the sound of Kiba sobbing into the tile. He clapped his hands once, briskly. "Okay, onboarding. Sasuke, you're the heavy hitter. Neji, eyes. Shikamaru, brain. Kakashi, you're the senior. Kurenai, mind work and field discipline." He glanced at Kiba on the tile film. "And Kiba's the warning. Always good to have one of those on the team. Welcome aboard." He turned toward the edge of the roof. He paused. He looked back over his shoulder. "Take the dog kid to the hospital. Tell the medics the eardrums are gone. They might be able to do something about the blood. They won't be able to do anything about the hearing." He stepped off the roof and rose into the evening air without looking back. Behind him, Kakashi crouched beside Kiba and put 2 fingers on the boy's neck and made eye contact with Kurenai across his shoulder. Kurenai picked up Akamaru, who was shaking. Sasuke stood with his arms crossed and his teeth in his lower lip. Neji stared at the place where Naruto had risen into the sky. Shikamaru looked at the blood on the roof tile and felt the math of his life recalculate. The 7 was formed. Within a month, the 7 had been deployed on 6 high-priority missions. Within 2 months, they had eliminated 3 rogue jonin who had been on the bingo book for over a decade. Within 3 months, they had cleared a missing Nin compound on the eastern border that the previous administration had been afraid to touch. Naruto did not fight on most of these missions. He sent the others. He watched from the air. He floated above the engagements with his hands in his jacket pockets, and he let his squad do the work, and he stepped in only when one of them was about to die. He stepped in for Sasuke twice. He stepped in for Kurenai once. He stepped in for Shikamaru never, because Shikamaru never needed it. He stepped in for Kakashi never, because Kakashi was Kakashi. Kiba never came back. The medics had told him the truth. He had retired from active service and gone to live with his sister at the kennels at the edge of the village. He could read lips. He could walk Akamaru. He could not hear. He never spoke about the night on the roof. He never said the name of the boy who had taken his hearing. When people asked him what had happened, he shrugged and changed the subject and went back to brushing his dog. The other 6 members of the 7 sometimes saw him from a distance, in the markets, walking with his head down. None of them ever crossed the street to say hello. They had all decided separately that Kiba's silence was a kind of mercy that should not be spent on small talk. In the 3rd month after the 7's formation, the Land of Fire's daimyo made his move. He was a soft man. He was a fat man. He wore silk and had servants and had never lifted a sword in his life. He was not a brave man. He was, however, a proud man. And he had decided that a 12-year-old Jinchuriki who had bullied the Hokage of Konohagakure into a puppet seat could not be allowed to set the precedent. He had a samurai army at his disposal. He had an alliance with the Land of Iron for additional steel. He had the assurance from his court advisors that the boy could be killed if enough men were sent at the same time. He had read the reports. He had heard the rumors. He had decided that the rumors were exaggerated. He sent 5,000 samurai. They marched on an open plain north of Konoha. They came in 3 squares. They had explosive tags by the cartload. They had archers in the rear. They had cavalry on the wings. They had the kind of formation a general writes in his memoirs when he wants to be remembered by future generals. Naruto met them alone. The 7 asked to come with him. He told them no. He told them this one was personal. He told them to stay in the village and watch the children. He flew out at sunrise. He did not take a flask. He had drunk an extra one that morning at Hina's table, sitting with her infant on his knee, smiling at the baby while it tried to grab his nose. He had paid Hina double on the way out. He had told her he might be home late. He arrived at the plane about 10 minutes before the army did. He floated about 6 feet off the ground at the center of the field. He waited. The samurai came over the ridge in a wave. The general, an older man with a horse and a banner, raised his hand. The army stopped at 500 meters. The archers strung bows. The tag carriers loaded. The general squinted at the small figure floating in the middle of the field. "Loose," he said. 1,000 explosive tags went up at once. They went up in arcs. They came down in arcs. They landed around Naruto in a ring that contracted to a point. The world disappeared inside a ball of fire that climbed for 100 meters into the sky and rolled outward across the grass and turned the plane into a black scar of cooked dirt. The shockwave hit the army's front line at 500 meters and knocked the front rank back a step. A horse stumbled. A banner went over. The general squinted into the smoke. The smoke cleared. The boy was still there. He was still 6 feet off the ground. He was straightening his collar. The general's face went a color that horses did not normally see in their riders. He shouted an order that came out as a word with no consonants. The cavalry on the wings began to charge. The archers knocked again. The tag carriers reached for their second loads. Naruto did not wait for them. He flew through the army. He went at Mach 3. The sonic boom alone did the work of an artillery strike. The men in the outer ranks of the formation went down with their internal organs in the wrong places. Eardrums burst across the entire front line. Horses screamed and threw their riders. The banner of the general went over for good. The shockwave preceded Naruto's body by half a second, and Naruto's body followed through it. He went through the front rank like a kunai through paper. Bodies came apart on contact. He did not slow. He went through the second rank. He went through the third. He came out the back of the formation and turned in midair and came back through the side of it. He moved across the field in long lines, and where his line went, the men in the line ceased to be men. He was a shape passing through space, and the space he passed through filled with red mist, and the mist filled the air, and the screaming filled the air, and the smell of cooked metal and broken bone and emptied bowels filled the air. He came back for a third pass. He went through the cavalry. The horses went down with the riders. He took the cavalry from the wings inward. He took the archers from the rear. He took the tag carriers' tags by lasering through the cart full of them, and the carts went up in a chain of detonations that took out the rear command structure on their own. In 90 seconds, a 5,000-man army was a field of meat. In 100 seconds, the only living thing in the formation was the general, on his horse, with his banner on the ground beside him, and his hand still raised in the order to loose. In 105 seconds, the general was on the ground beside the banner because Naruto had taken the horse out from under him with a beam through the animal's chest. In 110 seconds, the general was on his back, looking up at a sky he could no longer see. Because a small blonde figure was floating between him and the sun, Naruto looked down at him. He smiled gently. "Tell me where the daimyo is." The general told him. He told him in a voice that cracked on every word. He told him the route. He told him the carriage. He told him the guard rotation. He told him the back roads they would use. He told him everything he had ever known about anything, in order, alphabetically, until Naruto put a hand up and said that was enough. Naruto thanked him politely. He killed him with a beam through the chest. He took off into the sky. The daimyo's caravan was 40 kilometers south. Naruto reached it in 11 minutes, having stopped for a glass of milk on the way. He arrived at the carriage from above. The guard rotation saw nothing because they were looking at the road. He came down through the roof of the carriage in a single drop. The roof folded. The daimyo screamed. The 4 guards in the carriage drew swords. Naruto's eyes went red. The 4 guards went down. He did not look at any of them when he did it. He kept his eyes on the daimyo. The daimyo was on the floor of his own carriage with his back against the cushioned seat and his silk robes around his ankles and his hat sideways on his head. His skin was the color of paper. He had wet himself. He was making a small, repeated noise in the back of his throat, the noise of a man whose mind had gone somewhere it could not find its way back from. Naruto sat down across from him on the bench seat. He crossed his legs. He folded his hands. "Hi," he said. The daimyo could not answer. "I'm going to be brief," Naruto said gently. "You sent 5,000 men to kill me this morning. I just got back from the field. They are all dead. They will not come home. Their wives will not know what to do with their tools. Their children will grow up on small pensions. Their mothers will never have a body to bury. You sent them, and they died for you, and now they are dead." He leaned forward. He smiled. "Now we're going to fix it together. You're going to broadcast a message. You're going to read what I wrote for you. You are going to do it on the radio, on the street, on every signal the Land of Fire has, until every man, woman, and child in this country knows my name. You are going to call me the divine protector of the Land of Fire. You are going to call me the savior. You are going to call me the apex. You are going to bow your head when you say my name. Do you understand?" The daimyo nodded. He could not have done anything else. "Good," Naruto said. He produced a small piece of paper from his jacket. He pressed it into the daimyo's trembling hand. "I wrote it out for you. Don't change anything. Don't add anything. Don't try to be clever. I will know." The daimyo nodded again. His head bobbed against his collarbone like a doll's head. That afternoon, the country radio of the Land of Fire ran an emergency address. The daimyo's voice came through the speakers in every market and tea house and ramen stand from the capital to the smallest fishing village. He announced that the Land of Fire had a new divine protector. He announced the name. He announced it the way a man reads a death sentence on himself. He named Uzumaki Naruto the savior of the Land of Fire. He named him the apex. He named him the only man in the sky. He used those exact words. He used them 3 times in 3 different cadences, the way the script in front of him asked him to. He bowed his head when he said the name. He bowed his head 3 times. He never lifted his eyes during the broadcast. When the broadcast ended, he stood up from the chair, walked into a private bathroom in the eastern wing of his palace, and drowned himself in a basin of his own water. The note he left was short. It said, "He is in the room. He is in the room. He is in the room." The court replaced him with his nephew within the week. The nephew was 22 years old. The nephew had been reading the newspapers. The nephew did not need to be told what his job was. The nephew sent a letter of personal congratulations to Konoha, hand-delivered with a tribute of 20 chests of gold and a personal apology for the misunderstanding. He named his uncle the foolish old man who had failed to recognize the new shape of the world. He pledged the loyalty of the Land of Fire to the divine protector. He signed it in his own blood. Naruto wrote back. He thanked the new daimyo. He said the letter had been very moving. He sent a small flask of wine as a gift and a card and the phrase, "Looking forward to working with you, H." The nephew had the card framed. He hung it above his desk. He looked at it every morning before he signed any decision. He never made a decision the boy in the card would have disliked. The Land of Fire was Naruto's. The other countries noticed. Akatsuki, in particular, noticed. The organization had been watching for months. They had read the reports, they had seen the photographs, they had heard the recordings. Pain, in the reign of Amigakure, had stood at the window of his tower and listened to the broadcast of the daimyo's address with a face that did not move. He had not spoken for an hour after. When he had spoken, he had said, "He has not been collected. Send the durable ones. Find out what holds him." Hidan and Kakuzu had been chosen. Hidan was immortal. Kakuzu was old and angry and held 5 elemental hearts in his chest and had killed one of the Yondaime's contemporaries during the last war. Pain trusted them with the durability of the assignment. He did not trust them to be smart. He did not need them to be. He needed them to collect data before they died, and he had instructed them to fight the boy in such a way that anything that worked would be visible from a distance, so that Itachi and Kisame, watching from a safe perimeter, could record what they saw and report back. Itachi and Kisame did not get to record anything. The two-man assault team, Hidan and Kakuzu, found Naruto on the roof of the Hokage Tower at sunset. He was sitting on the ledge with his legs swinging. He was drinking from his flask. He had a small notebook open beside him. He had been writing in it. He looked up when they landed on the roof. He did not stand. He smiled. "Akatsuki," he said. "Wow, thank you. I was getting bored." Hidan laughed. It was a high, ugly laugh. He was a man who laughed when he was about to do something that would horrify other men. He pulled the triple-bladed scythe off his back. He spun it once around his head. He grinned at the boy on the ledge. "Lord Jashin's gonna love this one," he said. "The little weapon, the brat that took the daimyo. We got a name for sacrifices like you." He threw the scythe. He did it without warning, because that was how he liked to start fights, and because the scythe was on a chain and could be pulled back, and because he was confident in his throw at this distance, and because his arm was very, very strong. The scythe sailed across the roof at the boy's head. It struck the boy's left eye. It made a sound like a coin dropping on a marble floor. It bounced. It clattered onto the tile by Naruto's feet. The chain went slack in Hidan's hand. Hidan stared at the scythe. He stared at the boy. He looked at his own scythe again, lying on the tile, undamaged, with no blood on it and no curve to its blades. He looked at the boy's eye. The eye was open. The eye was fine. The eye was looking at him with the kind of mild interest a man might give to a house cat that had jumped onto his lap. Naruto wiped milk from the corner of his mouth with his thumb. He looked at the scythe on the ground beside him. "I'm stronger," he said. "I'm smarter. I'm better." He stood up off the ledge. "I am better." He turned his head toward Hidan and fired. The heat vision came out at full output. It came out as a single, broad wave of red light from both eyes, as bright as a small sun, hot enough to take stone down to slag. It hit Hidan's center mass. It vaporized his black cloak. It vaporized his shirt. It vaporized his skin. It vaporized the muscle. It vaporized the bone underneath. It vaporized the marrow. It went through him completely. Hidan did not have a body to regenerate from. There was no body. There was a shadow on the rooftop tile where his body had been. There was a small handful of ash on the breeze. There was no Hidan. Immortality requires something to persist. Naruto had removed the option. Kakuzu had been 3 meters behind his partner when it happened. He had a half second to react, and he used it well. He tore his mask off. He tore the cloak off his back. He opened the back of his body. The 5 elemental hearts inside him surged forward. They reared up over his shoulders on long cabled tendons. The 3 masks on his back animated and locked into firing positions. He howled, a long animal howl of grief and rage and the recognition of his own death, and unleashed every one of his elemental jutsu at once. A wall of fire, a wave of water, a fist of stone, a spear of lightning, a blade of wind. They came together in a single rolling assault that would have leveled a small district. They hit the spot where Naruto was standing. Naruto walked through it. He walked at a normal walking pace. He did not raise an arm. He did not flinch. The fire ran around him without burning him. The water poured over him and ran off without soaking the fabric of his jacket. The stone hit him and broke. The lightning hit him and went around. The wind hit him and parted. He kept walking. He came out the other side of the combined strike with steam coming off his shoulders and the ends of his hair lifting in the heat. And he reached Kakuzu in 2 more steps. Kakuzu was already dying inside his head before Naruto got to him. He had felt his 5 hearts give it everything they had. He had felt the strikes hit. He had felt them do nothing. He had lived for 91 years, through 3 wars, through the betrayal of his original village, through the killing of his last leader, through the long, slow accumulation of bounty money and stolen organs and replaced tendons. He had become something that could not be killed in any of the ways that other men could be killed. He had never met something that could walk through everything he was made of without changing pace. Naruto reached him. He raised one hand. He grabbed Kakuzu's skull. He squeezed. The skull collapsed inward. The sound was brief. The 5 elemental hearts behind Kakuzu let out one final twitch, like the legs of a dead spider, and went still. The body folded forward against Naruto's chest. Naruto stepped back. The body hit the tile. The 5 hearts sank down in the meat of the back and stopped moving. Naruto wiped his hand on his jacket. Fucking disappointments. He walked back to the ledge. He sat down. He picked up his flask. He took another sip. He picked up his notebook. He went back to writing. 3 rooftops away, in a blanket of genjutsu so thin it would have been invisible to anything without a Sharingan, Itachi Uchiha and Kasame Hoshigaki crouched and watched. Itachi did not speak. Itachi had been sent to record. Itachi had recorded. He had seen Hidan turn to ash. He had seen Kakuzu's combined elemental assault accomplish nothing. He had seen the boy walk through it. He had seen the squeeze of the hand. He had seen the dismissal at the end. The dismissal had been the worst part. The boy had said, "Fucking disappointments," the way a chef sends back a plate. "We should leave." Kasame said, quietly enough that even his own ears barely caught it. "Now, the cloaks first, the hats next. We leave by separate routes. We meet in 3 days." Itachi did not answer. He was looking at the boy on the ledge. He had been a member of a clan. He had been a brother. He had been a son. He had killed every member of his family except one, on the orders of the village he had loved more than he had loved them. He had spent his life since then watching his last brother grow up from a distance, hoping the boy would survive long enough to one day kill him and take his eyes and become whole. He looked at the boy on the ledge, drinking from a flask, writing in a notebook, and he felt something he had not felt since the night he had walked out of the Uchiha compound with blood on his sword. He felt sorry for his brother. He turned away. He followed Kasame into the dusk. They left Konoha that night. They reported to Pain and Amegakure 4 days later. Pain listened to the report. He sat on his throne in the rain. He looked down at the floor for a long time. He looked back up. He spoke a single sentence. "We will not engage. We will reposition. We will study." He did not make a second attempt. The Akatsuki, as a body, withdrew from the Land of Fire. Pain pulled his agents back. He pulled Sasori back. He pulled Deidara back. He pulled the rings closer to the chest. He turned the organization, in the space of one meeting, from a hunting party into a wake. Across the lands of the elemental nations, the news traveled fast. The remaining 4 Kage convened. They met in the Land of Iron, at the Iron Fortress of Mifune, the samurai general, in a chamber sealed with 3 feet of cold steel and the most powerful seals the 5 great nations could produce on short notice. They met without their guards. They met without their delegations. They met across a round black table with the Kage hats on stands behind them, in a room with no windows, where the only light came from oil lamps and the only sound came from their own breathing. A of Kumogakure, the 4th Raikage, sat with his arms crossed and the muscles in his jaw working. He was a mountain of a man. He had buried his own brother during the war. He had lightning armor that could split a mountain. He had 2 Biju under his command at the bottom of his village. He was the most physically powerful Kage of his generation, by a margin large enough that nobody seriously argued about it. He was looking at the empty space in the middle of the table, and he was trying to figure out how he had ended up sitting at it without a satisfying answer. Onoki of Iwagakure, the 3rd Tsuchikage, sat at A's left. He was a small old man with a bad back and a long memory. He had fought the Yondaime Hokage in the last war. He had been beaten by the Yondaime Hokage in the last war. He had spent the years since then telling himself that the loss was a fluke, a one-off, an event that could not be repeated. He had read the reports out of the Land of Fire. He had turned the reports over in his head for many nights. He had concluded, against every instinct he had, that this was no fluke. Mei Terumi of Kirigakure, the 5th Mizukage, sat at A's right. She was newly installed. She had blood on her hands from her own coup. She was a woman who had taken her village from a tyrant by doing what was needed. And she had come into this room knowing that what was needed now might be larger than what she had done. She was watching the door. She had a hand resting on the table near her hat, and the hand was steady, and the steadiness was a thing she had to work to maintain. Gara of Sunagakure, the youngest Kage at the table at 15 years old, sat across from A. He had taken the hat of the 5th Kazekage 2 years early, at the urging of his village. He had been a Jinchuriki. He had been, until very recently, the most feared boy in the world. He had a small frown on his face and a fold in his brow and a sand gourd at his back. He had been thinking about the boy in the land of fire for a very long time. He had been thinking about him longer than the others had. He recognized something in the reports. The alley. The chunin. The years of silence in the academy. The slow accumulation of bodies. He recognized the shape of a boy who had been alone for a long time and had come to a conclusion about it. He did not say any of this out loud. A spoke first. He spoke loudly because he was A, and he could not speak any other way. He said the words that the four of them had come here to say. He named the boy. He named the threat. He named the necessity. He proposed an alliance of the four remaining great nations, with the Land of Iron samurai as auxiliaries, with all available jonin pooled under joint command, with Gara Suna delivering the seal experts that could in theory extract the Nine Tails, with Onoki's Iwa delivering the long-range dust release that had killed Kage in the past, with Mei's Kiri delivering the corrosive lava release that turned bodies into pools, with his own Kumo delivering the speed and force to land the killing blow. He spoke for 20 minutes. The other three listened. Onoki nodded when nodding was called for. Mei made notes. Gara watched the door. When A finished, he leaned back in his chair and looked across the table. "We send the order tomorrow," he said. "We meet on the field in 2 weeks. 5,000 jonin, 3,000 chunin, every available specialist, Kazekage, your seals teams, Tsuchikage, your dust, Mizukage, your lava. We hit him in his village. We hit him at home. We finish this before he has a chance to come to us first. Are we agreed?" Onoki said, "Agreed." Mei said, "Agreed." Gara said nothing, looked at him, frowned. A chakra started to rise. Kazekage. Gara opened his mouth. The roof came off. It came off in a single horizontal cut. The cut went from the eastern wall to the western wall, 3 feet above the top of the iron beams, and the entire ceiling of the iron fortress lifted up and tilted and fell sideways onto the snow outside, leaving a perfect rectangle of open sky above the round black table. Snow drifted down through the opening. The oil lamps guttered. The 4 Kage looked up. The boy descended through the opening. He came down slowly. He had his hands in the pockets of his jacket. His blue and red collar was up. His blonde hair lifted around his face in the cold air. His blue eyes glowed at the edges with red light. The temperature of the chamber dropped by 10 degrees because the ceiling was gone, and rose by 10 degrees because his eyes were on. The two effects met somewhere over the table and made everyone in the room sweat at once. He landed without landing. He hovered above the center of the round table, level with their eyes, and let his sandals not quite touch the surface. He turned in a slow circle. He looked at each of them in turn. He smiled. "Hi, guys," he said warmly. "Sorry about the roof. Place needed an opening anyway." Conversation was getting stale. A's chakra lit up. He did not warn anyone. He did not say a word. He had built his entire life around one truth, which was that the Raikage was the fastest man in the world, and the second truth, which was that the fastest man in the world hit hardest first. He activated his lightning armor at maximum output. The armor crackled around him in a corona of yellow-white energy. The chair under him exploded into splinters. The table in front of him cracked from the discharge alone. He moved. He went from his seat to the table, to the air above the table, in less time than it took the others to inhale. He came up under Naruto's chin with his right fist drawn back and the full force of his lightning armor behind it. The same punch that had cracked a mountain in the last war, the same punch that had taken a Kage's head off in the last war, the punch that A had been preparing to throw since the moment he had read the first report out of the Land of Fire. Naruto caught it. He did it with one hand. He did not move. His feet did not shift. He caught A's fist out of the air the way a man catches a thrown object he expected. His expression did not change. The lightning armor crackled against his palm. The energy ran up his arm and around his neck and out through the top of his head and into the open sky and dispersed harmlessly. A's eyes went wide. The wide eyes of A, the 4th Raikage, were a thing that no member of his honor guard had ever seen. Naruto turned his wrist. A's right arm broke at the elbow. It broke with a sound that was wet and dry at the same time. The bone came through the skin. A's voice came out of him as a noise that was not a yell and not a word. He went sideways in the air, Momentum gone, and Naruto, still hovering, still with one hand in his pocket, lowered his head and fired heat vision down through both of A's knees. The beams went through the bone, they went through the cartilage, they cauterized as they went. A hit the floor of the chamber. He hit it on what was left of his legs. He hit it on his broken arm. He hit it on his face. The most powerful Kaji of his generation went down onto cold iron and did not get up. He made a sound. It was the sound of a man whose vocabulary had been replaced in the space of 2 seconds by pain. Onoki had his dust release half formed. He let it disperse. He set his hands on the table. He did not move. He understood the moment the Raikage went down that no jutsu he had would do anything in this room. He had spent his life being careful. He had survived 3 wars by being careful. He set his hands on the table and waited. Mei Terumi had a hand near her own gourd. She moved the hand to the table. She set it there flat. She breathed through her nose. Gaara had not moved. Gaara had not raised his sand. Gaara was looking up at the boy in the air, and his face had gone soft in a way that none of the others had ever seen. He recognized the boy. He recognized the loneliness behind the smile. He recognized the warmth the boy used like a knife. He recognized the way the boy floated above other people without any sense that other people deserved to be on his level. He had been that boy. He had nearly become that boy. He had been pulled back from that ledge by a sister and a brother and a sensei and a lot of long, hard years. He looked at the boy hovering above the table and he thought, "You were not pulled back." Naruto rose into the air above them. He went up to the level where the missing roof had been. He turned in another slow circle. He looked at the most powerful collection of shinobi leaders alive, at the 4 individuals who had been gathered in this room to decide what to do about him, and he let the silence explain what words could not. The silence stretched. The silence sat. The silence filled the room with the weight of a future none of them had voted for. Naruto looked down at A on the floor. He looked at Onoki. He looked at Mei. He looked at Gaara. He smiled. "The only man in the sky is me." He let that sit too. "Now," he said, "let's talk about your villages." He came down. He did not land on the table, but he sat on the empty air about a foot above it, cross-legged, the way a child sits in front of a campfire to hear a story. He folded his hands in his lap. He looked at each of them. "Tsuchikage, you're going to send your SEAL experts to Konoha, not to extract anything from me, just to clean up some old work my mother left in her files. You're going to do it for free. You're going to pretend it's a goodwill gesture. You're going to mean it." Onoki nodded. The nod was a small bob of the head, but it was a nod. "Mizukage, you have a problem with bloodline purges in your country that the previous administration was clearing up. I want it finished. I want every clan that was hunted under the old Mizukage protected, named, and seated on your council. You're going to do it within the year. You're going to send me their names when it's done." Mei opened her mouth. She closed it. She nodded. "Raikage." Naruto looked down at A on the floor. "You're going to live. The medics will set the arm. The medics won't be able to do anything about the legs. You'll walk again with help. You won't fight again. Killer B is going to be your active duty Kage from now on, in everything but the title. You're going to keep the hat. You're going to be a face. He's going to do the work. You're going to be okay with that. The reason you're going to be okay with that is that the alternative is that I kill you here in this room in front of these 3. Are we okay with that?" A's broken voice came out of him. "Yes. Good." Naruto turned his head. "Kazekage." Gaara lifted his eyes. Naruto looked at him for a long time. The look was different from the looks he had given the other 3. The look had something almost gentle in it. It had a recognition in it. It had the shape of a man looking into a mirror that was off by a few years. "You and me are going to talk later," Naruto said softly. "Without these 3. Without your siblings. Without anybody. There's some stuff I want to say to you. There's some stuff I want to ask you. Can we do that?" Gaara nodded. "Good." Naruto smiled. "Thank you." He stood up off the air. He turned in another slow circle. He looked at the open sky above the iron fortress. "All right," he said. "I'm going home. The daimyo's nephew sent me a really nice bottle of plum wine, and I want to open it before bed. Onoki, work on the SEAL teams. Mei, work on the bloodlines. A, work on getting better. Gaara, I'll come find you in a month. He rose into the air. He rose a meter, then 2, then 10, then 100, then 1,000. He went up faster than the eye could follow, and he disappeared into the open sky above the iron fortress. And the snow came down through the opening, and the 4 Kage sat at the round black table with the broken Raikage on the floor between them. And the silence was the only thing that filled the room for a very long time. Gaara did not speak for the first 3 hours after the ceiling came off. He sat at the black table and watched the Raikage's broken body being carried out by medics summoned from the Land of Iron's garrison. And he watched the snow fill the room through the missing roof, and he listened to the quiet negotiations that followed. The hushed voices of Onoki and Mei arranging their exits, the logistics of what they owed and when they owed it. He listened to all of it, and he felt the sand in his gourd stir against his back, the way it stirred when something in the world had shifted, and his instincts were recalculating whether to fight or to fold. He chose to go home. He chose to wait. He chose to trust that when the boy said 1 month, he meant 1 month, because everything the boy had said so far had come true in a way that left no room for interpretation. 1 month passed. The morning of the 31st day, the sky over Sunagakure opened like a door. Naruto came down through it at an angle that said he had been flying high and fast, his hair pushed back, his jacket collar up, his hands in his pockets. He landed in the courtyard of the Kazekage Tower with a sound that was halfway between footfall and thunderclap. Sand spiraled up around his feet, pushed outward by the displaced air, curling up past his knees in a ring that settled as quickly as it had risen. 2 Anbu on the tower walls dropped into combat posture. 2 Anbu on the tower walls saw the face behind the sand and went back to their posts without being told. Naruto stood in the courtyard. He looked up at the tower. He looked at the sun. He looked at the desert beyond the walls. He waited. Gaara came down to meet him within 3 minutes. The Kazekage wore his hat and his robes, and the expression of a man who had been preparing for this conversation since before he had the language to have it. He stopped in front of Naruto at a distance that was close enough to be personal and far enough to be respectful. And the sand in his gourd stirred once and went still, and they looked at each other in the midday heat of Suna, with the whole village watching from behind its windows. "Walk with me?" Naruto said. Gaara nodded. They went up. They went to the tallest point in the village, the old water tower on the western cliffs above the Academy District, where the desert opened into its true breadth, and the sky went from blue to white, and the wind carried dust that tasted like copper. Gaara climbed. Naruto flew. They arrived at the top at the same time. They sat on the edge of the reservoir platform with the village spread below them, and the dunes beyond that, and the horizon beyond that. Naruto produced his flask from the inner pocket of his jacket. It was warm against his fingers. He unscrewed the cap. He poured a small amount into the crystal glass he carried with him everywhere, and he set the flask on the metal platform beside him, and he held the glass in both hands the way he always held it, two-handed, thumbs meeting at the front, the way a child holds something precious. He drank. His eyes closed. His shoulders came down an inch. Something in his face went very young for a moment, and then it passed, and he opened his eyes, and he was himself again. Gaara watched the whole ritual. He watched it the way a man watches another man pray, with the recognition that whatever was happening was real to the person doing it, even if the shape of it made no sense from the outside. "What is that?" Gaara asked. Naruto set the glass down on his knee. He looked at it. He looked at Gaara. He smiled. A small, real smile, the kind that lived in the bottom of his face and never quite reached his eyes. "Milk," he said. Gaara did not ask a second question about it. He let the silence fill the space between them. The wind came across the dunes. It pulled at their hair and at the edges of Gaara's hat and at the tail of Naruto's jacket collar. They sat with it. "You said you wanted to talk," Gaara said. "I did." "About what?" Naruto drank again from his glass. He held the milk in his mouth for a long time. He swallowed. He wiped his upper lip with his thumb. He looked out over the desert. He looked at the village below them. The small shapes of people moving through streets, the market stalls, the children in the academy courtyard throwing practice kunai at wooden targets. He listened to their heartbeats. He listened to the way Gaara's pulse stayed even beside him. Steady, unmoved, the pulse of someone who was choosing to be still rather than being forced into it. "You know what I am," Naruto said. "I know what you are doing," Gaara said. "I know what you have done." "No," Naruto said. "You know what I am. You know it the way I know it about you. You know the shape of it. You know what it feels like to be in a crib and already understand that the people outside the crib are afraid of you. You know what it feels like to grow up knowing that the love other people talk about is a thing they have between each other and never between them and you." Gaara said nothing. He sat with it. The sand in his gourd moved once. A single slow rotation, like breathing. "I had a brother who tried to kill me," Gaara said. "I had an uncle who tried to kill me. I had a father who ordered me killed. I had a village that locked their doors when I walked down the street. I know what you are describing. Then you know why I am the way I am. I know why you started the way you started," Gaara said. "I know why the first year felt the way it felt. I know why the second year felt worse. I know why you decided at some point that since they were going to be afraid of you anyway, you might as well give them a reason. I know that feeling. I lived inside it for 12 years. 13, Naruto said softly. I had 13 before anyone looked at me without flinching. And what did you do with it? Naruto was quiet for a long time. The wind came and went. The sun moved a degree overhead. A bird, a small desert finch, landed on the edge of the reservoir platform and looked at both of them with its head cocked and its chest puffed, and then it flew away into the bright nothing of the sky. I just wanted someone to love me, Naruto said. He said it the way a man says something he has carried for a long time in a place where nobody could reach it. He said it without effect. He said it without the warmth he usually wrapped his words in. He said it in the voice that lived underneath all the other voices, the voice that was neither Homelander nor Naruto Uzumaki, but the raw thing that had existed before either name had been assigned to it. Gaara looked at him. His green eyes, pale and ringed and full of a history that matched the boy beside him piece for piece, stayed on Naruto's face. I know, Gaara said. The difference between you and me, Naruto said, and he stood up now and he looked out over the desert, and the red started at the edges of his blue irises the way it always did when something in him was shifting toward the truer temperature. Is that you let them pull you back? Someone grabbed your hand. Someone said your name. Someone told you that the way you were going was wrong and you listened. Yashimaru, Gaara said. Then Tamari, then Kankuro, then my sensei. 4 people. Naruto's voice was gentle. 4 people who decided you were worth the risk. 4 people who looked at the thing in the crib and said, that is mine, and I am keeping it, and I do not care what it costs. Yes. Naruto turned and looked at Gaara. The red in his eyes was bright now. His face was soft in a way that made the red more disturbing, because the two things should not have existed in the same expression. I had 0, Naruto said. I had a matron who pinched me. I had a village that whispered. I had a fox in my belly that tried to make me angry so it could get loose. And I had a memory of a woman in a white lab in a world that does not exist anymore, who was paid to mother me and who flinched when my eyes started to glow. He looked at the sky. He looked at the sun directly. His eyes could do that. The sun was just another light, and the red in them caught the desert light and turned it strange. You need me to be good, he said. You need me to be good so bad. I can see it in you. You think if you say the right thing, if you find the right word, if you reach me at the right angle, I'll what? Change? Go back to being a genin? Give the hat back? Let the councils run themselves again? He smiled. I'm never going to be what you want me to be, Gaara. I decided, a long time ago, if they were not going to love me the way I needed, then I was going to make them love me the only way that works. All of them, forever. Every single one of them. That is coercion, Gaara said. That is fear. That is worship demanded at the end of a blade. So, Naruto said. Gaara stood. He looked at Naruto. He looked at him the way he looked at the desert, with the full weight of knowing how much sand was out there and how little any one person could do about it. What's the worst that can happen to me? Naruto said gently. You shoot me? Stab me? He spread his hands. He smiled. I know, and I don't care. The sand in Gaara's gourd moved. It rose a quarter-inch above the lip of the container. It did not attack. It hovered, a defensive reflex, the body preparing for a thing the mind had already decided against. Below them, on the street that ran along the base of the water tower, Tamari had stopped walking. She was looking up. Her fan was on her back. Her hand was at the strap. Kankuro was beside her, puppet scrolls already in both fists, 3 meters of summoning wire trailing from his left index finger. They had been following from the ground. They had been listening. The distance was wrong for hearing, but the body language was right for reading, and they had been reading their brother's posture for 15 years, and they knew when the sand moved what it meant. Naruto heard them. He always heard them. He heard the acceleration of Tamari's pulse, the jump from 62 to 88 in 2 seconds. He heard Kankuro's hands tighten on the scrolls, the compression of paper between fingers, the small creak of the wire. He heard the shift of their weight and the readiness in their legs and the way their breathing went shallow with the preparation to move. He looked down at them. He looked back at Gaara. Gaara's face had changed. The expression on it was the expression of a man who has just realized he is standing on the edge of something, and the something has no bottom, and the only thing holding him up is the patience of the boy across from him. "Your sister's pulse just doubled," Naruto said conversationally. "Your brother's got his puppets ready. They love you, Gaara. They love you the way I wanted someone to love me. They're going to do something stupid in about 4 seconds if you don't give them a signal." Gaara raised his hand. He held it up, palm flat, fingers spread. The universal signal, in Suna's body language, for stand down. Below them, Tamari's hand came off her strap. Kankuro's scrolls went back into his vest. Their pulses dropped. They trusted their brother. Naruto watched the whole thing. He watched the signal and the obedience and the trust that moved between the three of them like water through connected vessels, and something crossed his face, something fast, something that went by before his smile could cover it. He looked away. He looked at the desert. He looked at the horizon line where the sand met the sky. "I will leave your village alone," he said. "I will leave your people alone. I will leave your brother and your sister alone." He turned back to Gaara. He held his gaze for a long time. The red in his eyes dimmed to a thread. Still there, still warm at the edges, but pulled back, held back, the way a fire is held back from a thing it has chosen to spare. "Because you are the only person in this world who looked at me without calculation or worship or fear," Naruto said, "and said something true. That is worth something." He rose off the platform. He went up a foot, and then a meter, and then 10, and he looked down at Gaara one more time with an expression that lived somewhere between farewell and the memory of what a different version of himself might have been able to say if things had gone differently in the first years. Then he was gone. A rising shape against the sun, going up and east, going fast, going home. The sonic boom came 3 seconds after the visual disappearance. The reservoir platform shook. Sand rattled in the gourd. Gaara sat back down on the edge. He sat with his legs hanging and his hands on the metal and the wind in his hair. He sat for a long time. Below him, Tamari and Kankuro waited. They waited because they trusted him, and because the sky above them was empty again, and because the thing they had been afraid of had chosen to leave. Inside the seal on Naruto's belly, far above the desert and climbing, the 9 tails stirred in the dark. The fox had been listening. He always listened. He had nothing else to do. He had heard the conversation. He had heard the words, "I just wanted someone to love me." He had heard the closing of the door. He had felt the shift in temperature when the boy's eyes went red and the closing happened, and the warmth that had been there for a moment went somewhere it could not be reached anymore. Kurama put his head on his paws and let the silence settle around him. He had been in many vessels. He had been sealed in many bodies across many centuries. He had been in Mito Uzumaki, who had treated him like a burden. He had been in Kushina Uzumaki, who had treated him like a prisoner. He had been in this boy, who treated him like a piece of furniture in a room he rarely visited. The fox closed his great red eyes. He breathed out a breath that moved nothing and disturbed nothing and reached no one. He let the dark of the seal press in around him, and he chose, with the limited agency left to him, to sleep. The letter arrived at Orochimaru's main laboratory in the land of rice fields 6 weeks after the Kage summit. It came by hawk, unmarked, with a single line written in a handwriting that none of his agents recognized. It said, "I know where you are. I'm coming Tuesday." Orochimaru read the letter twice. He burned it with a match from his personal kit. He sat in the center of his research chamber, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of 40 years of forbidden science. And he thought. He thought for 4 hours. He moved through the problem the way he moved through all problems. From the inside out, testing every surface, looking for the weakness that everything had to have, because everything in the history of the world had always had one. He reviewed the data. He had been reviewing the data since the first reports had come out of Konoha. The bent kunai, that had been year 1. The Chunin in the alley, year 2. The Root Massacre, year 12. The Daimyo, year 12. The Kage Summit, year 12. He had dissected the remains of Hidan's existence, a handful of ash recovered from the roof of the Hokage Tower by one of his agents in the aftermath. He had run the ash through every instrument he had. He had found nothing biological in it. He had found nothing supernatural in it. He had found nothing at all except carbon and trace minerals, which meant that whatever the boy's eyes did, they did it at a temperature that exceeded anything in the shinobi world's understanding of fire release chakra by orders of magnitude. He had autopsied Kakuzu's remains, the skull fragments recovered from the same location. The skull had collapsed inward in a pattern consistent with a compression force of approximately 8,000 pounds per square inch applied at a single focal point. A human hand, a child's hand. He had run 300 models on the invulnerability, using every test he could think of: poison, cellular degradation, parasitic organisms, corrosive compounds, sealing techniques that attacked at the molecular level. Every model came back the same. The boy's body refused to participate in its own damage. The physics of the invulnerability were wrong by every standard Orochimaru had access to. The body's surface simply did not interact with incoming force in the way that matter interacted with matter. It rejected it, it returned it. It stood there and refused. Orochimaru had spent his life seeking the perfect body. He had spent decades transferring from vessel to vessel, always looking for the one that could hold everything he wanted to become. He had taken Uchiha bodies for their eyes. He had taken Kaguya bodies for their bones. He had taken sound shinobi for their adaptations. He looked at the data and he saw the answer. The perfect body existed. It was in the land of fire. It was 12 years old and it was coming to visit him on Tuesday. He made his preparations. He deployed the first wave at 4 a.m. on Monday, 24 hours early, because Orochimaru had survived this long by never trusting a schedule that someone else had set. The first wave consisted of 6 chimera experiments. Bodies built from the combined genetic material of the Jugo clan's curse bloodline, the Kaguya clan's bone release, and a base template taken from a Hyuga defector he had acquired 3 years prior. They were fast. They were armored in living bone beneath their skin. They regenerated from damage at a rate that exceeded anything natural. Each one had been specifically designed to test a different aspect of the target's response. One was a speed type, built for sustained rapid engagement. One was a grappler, built for physical restraint, using bone pinning and tendon locking. One was a range type, built to fire bone projectiles from distance while the others closed. One was a toxin carrier, its body modified to release contact poisons from every pore. One was an absorption type, built with a modified version of the Aburame clan's insect network, keyed to devour chakra on contact. And one was a detonation type, built to explode on proximity with enough force to flatten a city block. He deployed them along the main road from Konoha to the land of rice fields. They found Naruto at noon. He was flying. They could not reach him in the sky. They spread out along the road and waited the way animals wait at a water source. The speed type ran the tree line. The range type took position on a hilltop. The grappler crouched in the grass. The toxin carrier settled into the irrigation ditch at the road's edge. The absorption type hid inside a hollow oak. The detonation type walked to the center of the road and stood there. Naruto came down because the detonation type was standing in a road he intended to walk on, and he found that mildly irritating. The detonation type triggered the moment Naruto's feet touched the dirt. The blast radius was 40 meters. The fireball climbed for 60. The shockwave flattened the grass and the trees and the hillside behind them and sent a pressure wave across the countryside that rattled windows in the nearest farming village. Naruto stood in the crater. His jacket was dusty. He brushed the left shoulder with 2 fingers. The speed type came in from the tree line at a pace that would have killed a regular jonin before they could form a hand seal. It closed the distance in less than a second. It reached Naruto. It hit him with a bone-plated fist at the base of the skull, with everything the Jugo transformation and the Kaguya bone armor could give a single strike. Naruto's head moved forward half an inch from the impact. It came back. He turned around. He looked at the speed type with mild interest. "Fast," he said. His hand shot out and caught it by the throat. He lifted it. He looked at it the way a man looks at a piece of equipment he has been asked to evaluate. He turned it sideways. He examined the bone plating under the skin with X-ray vision, the layered structure, the reinforced joints, the modified spine that allowed for the burst speed. "Someone put a lot of work into you," he said. He squeezed. The throat collapsed. He dropped the body. He looked at the tree line. He looked at the hilltop. He looked at the grass. He looked at the irrigation ditch. He looked at the hollow oak. He fired 5 beams in 5 directions in a single rotation of his head, a sweep that lasted less than a second. The range type on the hilltop came apart at the waist. The grappler in the grass lost its head. The toxin carrier in the ditch split from shoulder to hip. The absorption type inside the oak died with the oak. The beam went through the trunk and through the body inside and through the next 3 trees behind it. Naruto straightened his collar. He looked at the road. He looked north. He had a general direction. He had X-ray vision. He looked at the rolling hills of the land of rice fields, and he traced the electromagnetic signatures he had been tracking since he left Konoha. The faint hum of powered equipment, the heat signatures of living bodies in enclosed spaces, the distinctive pulse of the relay network that had been broadcasting to the cameras hidden near the ambush site. He found the cameras. He found the wires. He followed the wires underground, tracing them with X-ray vision through the dirt and the rock and the root systems and the buried cable housings that ran for 40 kilometers in a straight line toward the northeast. He followed the cable to the relay station. He followed the relay station's output to the next relay station. He followed the network to its terminus, buried in the side of a cliff behind a waterfall that would have been invisible from ground level. He landed outside the cliff entrance. He put both hands flat against the rock face. He looked through it. The laboratory was enormous. 12 levels, each one carved into the living rock of the mountain, each one connected by stairwells and freight elevators and emergency tunnels. He counted the bodies inside, 47 on the upper levels, mostly guards and maintenance personnel. 16 on the middle levels, laboratory assistants and nurses and data specialists. 8 on the lower levels, high-value experimental subjects still in their tanks. And 2 on the deepest level, in a chamber reinforced with seals from 3 different eras of the village system, 2 chakra signatures on the lowest level. One of them was enormous and wrong, spreading through multiple containers in a way that suggested the user had distributed their body across several locations simultaneously. The other was sharper, more contained, with the distinctive flicker of medical chakra running at high frequency. Orochimaru and Kabuto, Naruto went in through the front wall. He punched through the rock face with one fist. The wall was 6 feet of reinforced granite with seal work embedded in the mortar. It came apart around his hand like plaster. He stepped through the hole he had made into the first level corridor. Alarms went off. Red lights started spinning in the ceiling. Doors slammed shut along the corridor. Blast doors, rated for explosive tag detonation, with locking mechanisms designed by the best engineers the sound had produced. He walked through the first blast door. His chest hit it, and the door folded inward around his body, the steel bending and tearing, the locking bolts shearing from their housings, the whole mechanism coming apart like a curtain being pushed aside. He walked through the second. He walked through the third. He descended the stairwell at a normal walking pace, punching through each landing's blast door as he reached it. The alarms screaming around him and the red lights flashing against his face, and the bodies of the guards who tried to stop him collecting in the stairwell behind him. He lasered the guards. He did it without stopping. He did it without looking at them in most cases. They came from side corridors, and he fired sideways without turning his head, the beams going through walls and through bodies and through the equipment behind the bodies. 2 guards on level 4 had explosive tags ready. He fired through the tags before they could be thrown, detonating them in the guards' hands. The blast took out a section of corridor wall. He walked through the smoke and the rubble without adjusting his pace. Level 7 had cursed seal subjects. They came out of their cells with the black marks spreading across their skin. 8 of them, level 2 transformations already active, wings and horns and clawed hands and the manic energy of Orochimaru's branded soldiers. They rushed him in a pack. He looked at the first one with X-ray vision. He found the seal on its shoulder, the 3 Tomo mark sitting just beneath the skin, feeding the transformation. He fired a pinpoint beam through the mark. The seal burned away from the inside. The transformation collapsed. The subject dropped, unconscious, human-shaped again, twitching on the floor. He did the same to the second, the third, the fourth. He walked through them, finding the marks through their skin without needing them to turn around, firing through bone and muscle to reach the seals and burning them out at the source. The 8th subject, the largest, the most transformed, the one whose body had grown thick plates of chitin and a second set of arms, tried to grab him from behind. Naruto reached back without looking, found the back of its skull by hearing alone, and squeezed. The plates cracked. The body dropped. He descended. Level 10 had experimental failures, things that had been human once and were no longer close enough to count. They were in tanks, suspended in green fluid, connected to tubes and wires. They watched him pass with whatever they had left that could watch. Some of them pressed against the glass. Some of them opened their mouths. Some of them had been trying to communicate for years, and the glass was the only thing that kept their screaming inside. He looked at them. He kept walking. Level 12. The deepest level. The reinforced chamber. The door was 30 inches of alloy steel backed by 27 layers of paper seals from 3 different eras. Uzumaki-style barrier seals from the founding period, Sound-era containment seals from Orochimaru's own design, and a base layer of Senju wood-release reinforcement that somebody had paid a lot of money for. The door was meant to keep something in, or to keep something out. Naruto hit it with an open palm. The door bent inward at the center. He hit it a second time. The seals fired, all 27 layers lighting up at once, pouring containment chakra into the alloy, trying to hold the structure together by force of will and ink. He hit it a third time. The seals burned out from the inside. The door folded. The hinges tore from the wall. The whole thing fell inward in 2 pieces and clanged against the floor of the chamber beyond. Kabuto Yakushi was waiting inside. He was standing at the center of the chamber in a medical gown over his standard clothes, his glasses reflecting the emergency lights. His sage mode was partially active. The Ryuchi cave markings were spreading around his eyes and down his neck, and the horn on his forehead was half-formed, and the chakra running through his hands was several times stronger than it had been the last time anyone had measured it. He had a scalpel in his right hand, a chakra scalpel, glowing blue at the edges with the full output of his medical ninjutsu. In his left hand, he had a syringe the size of a combat knife, filled with something green and luminescent. He had been preparing for this for 3 weeks. He had rehearsed every possible opening. He had studied every piece of data Orochimaru had collected. He had modified his own body specifically for this encounter. The cells in his left arm were Jugo-derived, capable of hardening to bone-level density on impact. The cells in his right arm were Sugetsu-derived, capable of liquefying to avoid counterstrikes. He had sage chakra running through his system at a concentration that would kill a normal shinobi. He was, by any conventional measure, the most dangerous medical combatant alive. "I've been expecting you," Kabuto said. He pushed his glasses up with the hand holding the syringe. The green fluid caught the light. "I know," Naruto said pleasantly. I could hear your heartbeat from 3 levels up. It's been going like a rabbit for the last 2 minutes. Kabuto moved. He was fast. Sage mode gave him sensory perception that exceeded normal human reaction time by a factor of 4. He came in with the chakra scalpel at an angle designed to sever the tendons of the target's right arm, a disabling strike aimed at the intersection of the brachioradialis and the extensor carpi radialis, a cut that would drop any shinobi's weapon hand in a single pass. The scalpel hit Naruto's forearm, the chakra blade made contact with the skin and dispersed. The energy of the medical chakra broke against Naruto's surface the way water breaks against a pane of glass, running off in directions it was never meant to go, losing coherence, fading. Kabuto's hand was still moving through the arc of the strike when the resistance registered in his wrist. He looked at the scalpel. The blade was out. There was adapted immediately. He was Kabuto, and adaptation was what he did. He switched to the syringe. He drove the needle at the junction of Naruto's neck and shoulder, aiming for the external jugular, trying to get the green compound into the bloodstream. The needle hit Naruto's skin. The needle bent. Kabuto stared at it. The needle had curled backward against itself like a piece of wire hitting stone. The green fluid leaked from the broken tip and ran down Naruto's collar without touching his skin, rolling off the fabric the way rain rolls off waxed cloth. Kabuto reached for the sage chakra in his system. He channeled everything he had into his right fist, a sage mode enhanced strike, carrying the full force of the natural energy he had accumulated, enough to crack a mountain wall, enough to put a crater in the earth. He threw the punch at Naruto's chest. The fist hit. Naruto did not move. He stood there with his hands in his pockets and looked at Kabuto with the mild, pleasant expression of a man waiting for someone to finish a sentence. Kabuto's arm was broken. The bones of his wrist and forearm had fractured on impact, the same bones that had been reinforced with Jugo cell density for exactly this purpose. The reinforcement had failed. The bones had shattered against the surface of Naruto's chest, the way a hand shatters against a wall when thrown with more force than the hand can structurally tolerate. Kabuto pulled back. His right arm hung at his side. The Suigetsu cells in his left arm activated. The limb liquefied and reformed into a long, thin blade shape, water hardened to edge quality by the infusion of Sage chakra. He came in again. He drove the blade arm at Naruto's eye. Naruto caught the tip of the blade arm between his thumb and forefinger. He held it. The water blade could not advance. It could not reform around his grip. He held it the way a man holds a piece of paper up to the light. "You know what the problem with smart people is?" he said pleasantly. "You think being smart is the same as being better. It isn't." He pulled Kabuto forward by the arm. Kabuto came forward. His body followed the arm because the arm was still attached to the shoulder. Naruto caught him by the collar with his other hand and lifted him off the floor. Kabuto's feet left the ground. His glasses slipped down his nose. His sage mode markings flared as the natural energy in his system tried to compensate for the acceleration and the pressure. "I'm stronger," Naruto said. "I'm smarter. I'm better." He held Kabuto at arm's length. He looked at him the way a man looks at a tool that has finished being useful. "I am better." He set Kabuto against the wall. He pressed him flat against the stone. He raised his free hand and pointed 2 fingers at Kabuto's left wrist. The beam came out thin. It went through the wrist. The hand came off. Kabuto screamed. The sound filled the chamber and bounced off the reinforced walls and came back distorted. Naruto pointed at the right wrist. The beam came out again. The second hand came off. Kabuto's scream went higher. He slid down the wall. His stumps bled against the stone. His sage mode collapsed. The markings receded. The horn dissolved. The chakra that had been holding the transformation together ran out of his body like water running out of a cracked vessel. Naruto let him drop. He looked at the man on the floor, the smartest medical ninja alive, handless, leaking, curled against the base of the wall with his glasses cracked and his body all into shock. "Stay! Stay!" Naruto said. He turned toward the inner door of the chamber. The door behind the door. The room where the real prize was waiting. He did not punch through this one. He walked through it. His chest hit the door, and the door came apart around him like something that had already been broken and was only pretending to be whole. He emerged on the other side into a space that was larger than it should have been. A vaulted chamber carved from the bedrock, lit by phosphorescent tubes that ran along the ceiling in patterns that matched Orochimaru's aesthetic. The chamber smelled of preservatives and old skin and something older than both. Orochimaru was at the center of the chamber. He was spread across 6 bodies, his original and 5 additional hosts arranged in a circle around it, each one connected by thick white snakes that ran between them like cables, distributing his consciousness and his chakra across 6 simultaneous physical forms. It was a failsafe. If one body was destroyed, the consciousness would shift to the next. If 2 were destroyed, it would shift to the third. It was how he had survived this long. It was how he had always survived. He looked at Naruto with the face of his original body, the pale, angular face, the golden eyes with their vertical pupils, the long black hair that fell around his shoulders like something alive. He was smiling. He was always smiling. The smile was his armor and his weapon and his mask and his truth. The perfect body, Orochimaru said. His voice came from all 6 mouths at once. Walking into my laboratory, you have no idea how long I've been waiting for this moment. I do, Naruto said. I could hear you talking to yourself about it through the walls, 3 floors up. You really need better soundproofing. Orochimaru's smile widened. His original body stood. The 5 host bodies stood with it. The white snakes between them pulsed. The 6 bodies moved as one, a hexagonal formation, closing inward on the boy at the center of the room. Let me show you something beautiful, Orochimaru said. He launched the living corpse reincarnation from all 6 bodies simultaneously. It was the grandest version of the technique he had ever attempted. 6 streams of consciousness converging on a single target, 6 complete Orochimaru psyches pouring their combined will into the transfer, 6 sets of chakra pathways opening to receive the new vessel's form. His body opened. His skin peeled back. The white snake that was his truest self emerged from the inside of the original body, enormous, wet, glistening, with scales that caught the phosphorescent light and threw it back in patterns that moved faster than they should have. The snake lunged. It poured toward Naruto's body. It opened its mouth. It went inside. The technique entered Naruto's body. It crossed the threshold of his skin. It moved inward, spreading through the tissue, reaching for the central nervous system, reaching for the consciousness it intended to displace. It found the consciousness. It found 2 of them. The first was a boy named Naruto Uzumaki, 12 years old, sitting in the center of his own mind, the way a man sits at his own kitchen table, with his hands folded and his eyes open, and the comfortable posture of someone who has never been asked to leave a room he considers his. The second was Homelander, the full psyche, the original, intact, occupying the same space with the density of a lifetime, decades of memories, decades of being the thing that everyone was afraid of, decades of being the strongest thing in whatever room he entered. The psyche filled the mindscape like a physical weight. It took up space the way a mountain takes up sky. Orochimaru's technique reached toward the first consciousness. It tried to push. It tried to displace. It applied the force that had successfully displaced dozens of other minds over decades of practice. The spiritual pressure, the will, the weight of a genius-level intellect backed by 6 simultaneous psyches pouring their full intent into the transfer. The 2 occupants looked at the technique. They looked at it the way a tenant looks at someone who has walked into their home uninvited. They pushed back. The technique was expelled. It was pushed back out of Naruto's body at a pressure that exceeded anything Orochimaru's will could resist. It was not absorbed. It was not contained. It was rejected. The way a body rejects a transplant, the way an immune system expels a foreign organism, the way a locked door refuses a key that does not fit. Orochimaru came back. He crashed into his original body with a force that cracked the spine of the host. The 5 secondary bodies collapsed, the snakes between them going limp, the connections severing, the distributed consciousness snapping back into a single form like an elastic band that had been stretched past its limit. He fell against the wall of his own chamber. He coughed. Blood came out. He looked at the boy across the room. Naruto had not moved. He was standing in the same spot he had been standing in when the technique had entered him. His hands were still in his pockets. His face was still pleasant. You wanted to live forever, Naruto said. He lifted off the ground. He rose 3 feet. His eyes went bright. The red started at the edges and filled inward until the blue was gone and only the light remained. 2 points of concentrated heat aimed down at the man on the floor. He fired from the feet up. The beam touched Orochimaru's sandals first. They burned. The feet beneath them burned. The ankles burned. The shins burned. The technique was not a sweep. It was a sustained, steady output, held in place, moving upward at the speed of a slow pour. Orochimaru tried to shed his skin. The beam was faster than the shedding. He tried to push the white snake form outward to escape from the burning body into a new form. The beam followed. It caught the snake as it emerged. It burned through the white scales. It burned through the flesh beneath the scales. It moved upward through the body at the same steady rate. Knees, thighs, hips, belly, ribs, chest, shoulders, neck. The snakes went with the man. They burned as they tried to escape. They burned in their coils and in their lengths and in their heads and in their mouths. The shedding stopped. The technique stopped. The body stopped. The laboratory filled with the smell of something that had spent decades being reptilian, burning back down to carbon. Naruto landed. He looked at the remains. There were few. A shadow on the stone. A smear of something that had been white and was now black. A pair of golden contacts, cracked from the heat, sitting on the floor where eyes had been. He turned. He walked back through the inner chamber. He walked past Kabuto, who was still against the wall, still conscious, still staring at his own stumps with the expression of a man whose world had narrowed to a very small number of things. Naruto did not look at him again. He walked past and through the outer door and up the stairwell. He emerged onto level 10. The experimental failures in their tanks, the things that watched him with whatever they had left. He stopped walking. He looked at them. He looked at the tubes. He looked at the wires. He looked at the fluid that kept them suspended and alive and in pain. He raised his hand. He pointed at the first tank. He fired a beam at the lock mechanism. The lock broke. The glass cracked. The fluid drained. The thing inside fell forward onto the floor and took its first free breath in years. It looked up at him with an eye that was mostly human and an eye that was mostly something else. He walked down the row. He fired at every lock. Every tank drained. Every subject fell forward. Some of them could stand. Some could only crawl. One of them could only lie on the floor and breathe and look at the ceiling with the overwhelmed expression of something that had forgotten what ceilings looked like from this angle. He stood at the end of the row by the stairwell exit and watched them find their feet. He watched them help each other. He watched the ones who could stand lift the ones who could not. He walked out of the laboratory. He emerged through the cliff face into the afternoon sun and the sound of the waterfall and the smell of the forest. He flew home. He flew at a speed that broke the sound barrier over the rice paddies and sent a rolling thunder across the farmland that the farmers below took for a storm coming in off the coast. He was home by dinner. He went to Hina's house. He sat at her kitchen table. She poured the flask. He drank. He paid. He left. He went home. He bathed. He sat on his bed in the dark and he held the flask in both hands the way he always held it. And he looked at the wall, and he did not think about the things in the tanks or the way they had looked at him when the glass cracked. He did not think about it because he had already decided that it had happened, and it was over. And whatever it meant about him was a thing he did not need to name. He slept. He slept well. He always slept well. Deidara came over Konoha on a Tuesday, 3 weeks after the fall of the sound. He came at 30,000 feet on a clay bird the size of a fishing vessel, wings pumping the upper atmosphere, the wind so cold at that altitude that ice crystals were forming on the clay feathers and cracking off in sheets as the bird descended. He was grinning. He had been grinning since he left Amegakure. Pain had given him the reconnaissance assignment, and he had said yes before the word was finished, leaving Pain's mouth, because Deidara had been furious since the withdrawal order, and this was his chance. He was an artist. He believed in his art with the conviction of a man who had literally put mouths in his hands to serve it. He believed that the boy below him was simply a canvas that had never been properly presented with the correct medium. He believed this with the totality of faith, and the absence of evidence that characterized most of his beliefs about his own work, he spread the C4 first. The microscopic bomb scattered from the bird in a cloud that covered a 2-kilometer radius above the village, invisible, weightless, drifting down through the air column toward the target zone. He timed it. He counted. He watched from above as the cloud settled to operating altitude. He made a seal with his left hand. He pressed the detonator mouth against the trigger. Katsu. The detonation was cellular level. Every microscopic bomb ignited simultaneously within the kill radius. The air itself seemed to shatter. The visible spectrum went white for a fraction of a second as the combined output of 2 billion individual explosions at the molecular level created a flash that was visible from 40 kilometers away. The sound arrived later, a bass roar that rolled across the landscape like an earthquake made of noise. From 30,000 feet, Deidara watched the flash. He watched the smoke. He watched the clearing of the smoke. He leaned over the edge of his bird and squinted down at the target area. Naruto was sitting on the Hokage monument, on the carved head of the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze. He had a piece of paper in one hand and a pen in the other. He was doing paperwork. He looked up. Deidara's grin faltered. Naruto looked up the sky. He could see the bird at 30,000 feet with the same clarity other people could see a dog across the street. He could see the man on the bird. He could see the grin. He could see it faltering. "Oh," Naruto said. "Was that supposed to do something?" His voice carried. It should not have carried at 30,000 feet of altitude difference, but Deidara heard it. Carried on the wind. Carried on something else. Carried on the fact that when Naruto Uzumaki wanted you to hear him, you heard him. Deidara screamed. It was a scream of artistic fury, of violated principle, of a man whose medium had been returned to him unused. He did the only thing left to him. He tore off his cloak. He tore open his chest. The mouth there, the final mouth, the one he had never used, opened wide. He fed it everything. He fed it every grain of clay in his body. He felt the detonation begin inside himself. He felt the chain reaction start. He looked down at the boy on the mountain and he said his last word. "Art is a bang." Yeah. The C-Euro went off. The detonation was spherical. It expanded outward from the point of origin at the speed of light in all directions simultaneously. A sphere of white fire that consumed the clay bird and the air around it and the sky itself in a radius that exceeded anything the elemental nations had produced outside of a Biju event. The fireball was visible from 3 countries away. The shockwave reached the ground 4 seconds later and cracked windows in every building in Konoha. The flash burned after images into the eyes of everyone looking at the sky within a 50-kilometer radius. The mushroom cloud climbed for 2 kilometers above the detonation point and spread into a cap that blocked the sun for 11 minutes. The smoke took 30 seconds to clear. The clear began at the edges, the wind carrying the particulate matter eastward, opening the view from the ground up. People in the streets of Konoha looked up. They looked through the gap in the smoke. They looked at the Hokage monument. Naruto was standing on the 4th Hokage's carved head. His jacket had a scorch mark on the left shoulder. He brushed it off with 2 fingers. He looked up at the empty sky where Deidara used to be. "Art," he said dryly, and turned back toward his paperwork. Sasori came at the same time Deidara had been in the sky, from the ground, from the eastern approach with his puppet theater deployed in a 100-unit formation across the rooftops of the village's commercial district. He had been waiting for the explosion. He had positioned himself during the flash, using the 11 minutes of sun blockage to move his strings into place without being spotted from above. His 100 puppets were distributed across 6 city blocks, each one on a different surface, each one connected by strings of chakra that ran through the air at frequencies most sensors could not detect. The 3rd Kazekage puppet was his vanguard, the most dangerous puppet in the world, loaded with iron sand and the distilled poison that Sasori had spent 20 years perfecting. Behind it, the theater spread. 50 combat puppets in the first rank, 30 utility puppets in the second, 20 specialist models in the rear. It was the full output of a lifetime of engineering. It was a small army operated by a single will. Sasori launched the theater the moment the smoke cleared. The puppets came alive across the rooftops, rising from their positions, strings tightening, weapons deploying, the entire network moving as one coordinated system toward the figure on the monument. The third Kazekage puppet led the charge. Iron sand erupted from its storage seals in a wave, black particles filling the air like a locust swarm, shaping into blades and columns and cones, each formation designed to cut from a different angle. The poison gas deployed behind the iron sand wall, a green mist that killed within 3 seconds of inhalation and within 7 seconds of skin contact. The combined assault moved toward Naruto at the speed of a thrown kunai. Naruto stepped off the monument. He dropped into the path of the assault. The iron sand hit him. The blade struck his chest and his arms and his face and bounced off with the sound of coins hitting marble. The poison gas rolled over him. He breathed it in and breathed it out, and it did nothing because his lungs did not participate in the exchange of chemicals that could harm them. He reached into the iron sand cloud and grabbed the third Kazekage puppet by the chest plate. His fingers closed around the mechanisms inside. He compressed. The puppet's torso crumpled inward, the iron sand storage, the articulation joints, the poison reservoirs, all of it folding into a ball of metal and wood under the pressure of his grip. He looked at the theater across the rooftops. He looked at the 50 puppets in the first rank moving toward him on their strings. He threw the Kazekage puppet. He threw it at Mach 1. The broken puppet crossed the distance between him and the theater in less time than the eye could follow. It hit the first rank at the center of the formation and threaded through the strings. The thrown mass tangling the chakra lines of 30 puppets simultaneously, pulling them off their trajectories, knotting the whole network into a mess that hung in the air like a ball of wire. He fired. The beam swept across the tangle in a single horizontal arc. The mass of puppets and strings and iron fell in pieces. 30 down, the second rank tried to flank. Sasori was fast. He was the best puppet master who had ever lived, and his fingers were moving through string adjustments at a speed that exceeded the comprehension of anyone watching. He pulled the utility puppets into defensive formation and the combat puppets into a pincer. Naruto moved through them. He went at speed, faster than the strings could adjust, faster than Sasori's fingers could track. He went through the formation the way a hand goes through hanging beads, and where he passed, the puppets came apart. He hit them at the joints. He hit them where the strings attached. He hit them at the weak points that every construction had, because nothing built by human hands was built to withstand what he was. 20 down in 3 seconds. 10 more in the next 2. Sasori detached from the Hiriko shell. He came out of the armored puppet that had been his mobile station, the scorpion-tailed casing that he had worn like a second skin for years. He ejected from it at speed, his true form emerging, the puppet body, the chest cavity, the iron-plated heart case at the center of his chest. The retractable blades came out of his forearms. The flamethrowers in his palms lit. The poison on every edge of his body was the strongest compound ever synthesized in the shinobi world. A compound that killed in half a second on contact with living tissue. He was fast. He was dangerous. He was the concentrated output of a man who had made himself into the weapon he could never build outside himself. Naruto caught him by the head. He did it with one hand. The hand closed around the top of Sasori's skull, the puppet skull, wooden and reinforced with the red hair on top shifting in the wind. Naruto squeezed. The wood collapsed. The mechanisms inside collapsed with it. The iron heart case at the center of the chest collapsed. The compressed force traveling down from the skull through the body in a wave that took everything structural with it. The flame inside the heart case flickered. It went out. The strings connecting every remaining puppet in the theater went limp at the same moment. Across 6 city blocks, the remaining puppets dropped, falling off rooftops, clattering into streets, landing in piles on awnings and in gutters, and on the heads of terrified civilians who had been sheltering indoors. Naruto opened his hand. What was in his hand fell to the street below. He wiped his palm on his jacket. He straightened his collar. He looked at the mess in the streets, the wooden bodies, the strings, the scattered parts. "Clean up on aisle everywhere," he said to no one, and flew back to the monument to finish his paperwork. Kasame Hoshigaki arrived at the gate of Konoha 4 days later. He came on foot. He came alone. He came in his Akatsuki cloak with Samahata on his back and a small pack over one shoulder, and the expression of a man who had made his peace with something large enough that the making peace with it had taken his face from tense to almost soft. He asked at the gate to be announced. He said his name. The Chunin at the guard post stared at him. The Chunin's partner reached for the emergency summon. Kasame held up both hands, palms forward, no weapon, no technique. "I'm here for the boy," he said. "I'm here alone. I'm here to fight. I'd prefer if we went to the field outside the east wall so you don't lose the gate." The message went up the chain. It reached the Hokage Tower in 6 minutes. Naruto was at his desk, flask in hand, reading reports. He heard the message arrive before it was delivered. He heard the runner's footsteps in the corridor, the elevated pulse, the way the man's breathing changed as he approached the office door. "Send him to the east field," Naruto said, before the runner could knock. "I'll be there in 10. He took 15. He finished his glass. He refilled it from the flask. He drank the refill slowly. He set the flask in the desk drawer. He stood. He stretched. He flew out the window. The east field was a flat expanse of training ground that stretched for 2 kilometers between the village wall and the tree line at the forest's edge. It was where Genin teams practiced formation work. It was empty at midday. The teams were at the academy. The Jonin sensei were at the mission desk. The field was grass and nothing else. Kasame was standing at the center of it with Samehada planted in the dirt beside him. He had his arms crossed. He was looking at the sky. He watched Naruto descend from the east at a shallow angle, coming down with his hands in his pockets, landing without landing, his feet stopping 6 inches above the grass, hovering there. They looked at each other. Kasame grinned. It was the full grin. All the teeth, the pointed ones and the flat ones, the gums above them blue-gray and showing. It was the grin of a man who had found what he was looking for. "I've been killing things for 30 years, Kasame said. "I've killed people who deserved it. I've killed people who didn't. I've killed Jinchuriki and Kage candidates and one man who was maybe the most decent person I ever met, and I killed him anyway because I was told to." He uncrossed his arms. He rolled his shoulders. He cracked his neck. "I don't want to die behind Pain's curtain. I don't want to die following orders. If I'm going out, I want to go out going at something that can actually take a hit." Naruto looked at him for a long moment. He looked at the man's body language, the ease of it, the honesty of it. He listened to the pulse. It was steady. It was even. It was the heartbeat of a man who had stopped being afraid of anything approximately 12 hours ago and had been carrying that freedom with him like a new pair of lungs ever since. "I respect that," Naruto said. Kasame's grin went wider. He pulled Samehada from the dirt. He slung it across his shoulder. The bandages on the great sword writhed, the living blade sensing something nearby and trying to reach for it. Trying to feed, finding nothing to feed on. "Water release, great shark bomb technique," Kasame said, and the sky turned blue. The water came from nowhere and everywhere, pulled from the air like from the moisture in the soil. From the river a kilometer to the north, it rose around the field in a wall. It rose 50 meters, 100, 200. The field was gone. The grass was gone. The air was gone. What replaced it was a lake, a kilometer-wide sphere of summoned water that swallowed the training ground and everything on it. Inside the lake, Kasame was in his element. He merged with Samehada. The fusion transformation took him. His skin went blue-gray. His teeth went sharp. His body doubled in size. The sword's scales merged with his own. He became the shark, the full version, the apex predator of a self-contained ocean. He came at Naruto from every direction simultaneously. The water itself was his body. The currents were his limbs. He struck from the left with a physical tackle at submarine speed. He struck from the right with a wave of pressure that would have crushed a building. He struck from below with a rising jaw that could bite through a ship's hull. He was the water and the water was him, and the water was everywhere. The tackles hit Naruto. The pressure waves hit Naruto. The jaw closed around Naruto's torso. None of it moved him. He stood inside the water sphere with his arms at his sides and his hair drifting in the current and his eyes open and glowing, and the attacks hit him and did nothing the way the wind does nothing to a mountain. Samahata tried to feed. The merged sword, the living blade that could devour any chakra it touched, pressed its mouths against Naruto's skin and tried to drain. There was nothing there. The sword scales flared and closed and flared again in confusion. It was a creature that ate chakra the way sharks ate fish, and it had found a body that contained none. It opened its bandages wide, confused and hungry and unable to understand why the meal in front of it was empty. Naruto reached down and patted it on the blade, the merged blade that was now part of Kasame's body. He patted it the way a man pats a dog that has tried to play bite his hand. "Nothing there," he said pleasantly. His voice was clear inside the water. It carried through the liquid as though the physics of sound had decided to cooperate with him. He grabbed the merged blade section of Kasame's body with both hands. He twisted. The blade snapped. Samahata broke in half, the living tissue tearing black, the scales going rigid in shock, the bandages whipping free. The sword screamed. It made a sound that was audible inside the water sphere as a high, keening wail, the sound of a weapon that had lived for centuries dying in two pieces. Kisame surged out of the fusion. He came back to his own form, blue-skinned, breathing hard, standing on the surface of his own summoned water, with the broken halves of Samahata floating in the lake around him. He looked at the pieces. He looked at the boy standing in the center of his world. He launched the 1,000 hungry sharks. The formation erupted from the water in every direction, 1,000 chakra construct sharks filling the space between them, each one the size of a man, each one moving at weapon speed with jaws that could bite through steel. They came from above and below and behind and beside. They came as a wall of teeth and force. They hit. They hit Naruto from every angle. They bit. Their jaws closed on his arms and his legs and his torso and his head. They applied the force of 1,000 simultaneous impacts. Naruto stood inside the formation. He waited for it to spend itself. The sharks broke against him. Their teeth shattered on his skin. Their constructs lost coherence on contact and dissolved back into water. The formation collapsed around him in layers, from the outside in, each shark hitting and breaking and dissolving, until the last one in the center hit his chest and fell apart against the fabric of his jacket. He looked at Kisame through the clearing chaos. "Is that all you got?" he asked. He said it without mockery. He said it as a real question. He said it with the tone of a man who had been hoping for more and was willing to wait if there was more coming. Kisame was breathing hard. The water sphere around them was dimming. The chakra sustaining it was running low, the walls starting to thin. His reserves were emptying. His body was exhausted from the fusion and the separation and the formation level output. He looked at the boy across the surface of the dying lake and he knew the answer to the question. He grinned anyway. He grinned because he was Kasame Hoshigaki, and he had spent 30 years grinning at things that were going to kill him. And this was the last one, and he was going to do it right. He came in physical. He dropped the water. He dropped the jutsu. He dropped everything except his body and his fists and his speed, and the 30 years of taijutsu that he had learned before Samahata had ever come into his life. He closed the distance at Jonin speed. He threw everything he had at the boy's body, fists and elbows and knees and the head, the forehead, driving it forward in a desperate, beautiful, final series of strikes that hit and hit and hit and did nothing and hit again. Naruto caught him. He caught him by both shoulders. He held him there, at arm's length, with Kasame's fists still raised and his chest heaving and his blue skin slicked with the water of his own technique. They stood on the grass of the east field. The water had drained away, sinking into the earth, leaving the field muddy and wet and smelling of ozone. "You picked a good death," Naruto said. Kasame looked at him. Something in the blue-gray face settled. Something in the pointed grin went soft at the edges. Not into fear, not into grief, but into something that looked a lot like peace. The peace of a man who had spent 30 years looking for the fight that would end him, and had finally found it in a field outside a village he had spent his career trying to destroy. "Yeah," Kasame said. "I did." The beam came out clean and horizontal. It went through the center of Kasame's chest. The light came out the back. The body went still in Naruto's hands. The grin stayed. It stayed the way a carved thing stays. Permanent, Unbothered, fixed, Naruto set the body down on the wet grass. He set it down gently. He straightened the arms at the sides. He looked at the two halves of Samahata on the ground. The pieces had washed to the edge of the field with the draining water. He walked to the larger piece. He picked it up. He held it for a moment, the dead weight of a weapon that had been alive for centuries and was now just metal and scale and silence. He set it back down. He walked back toward the gate. Inside the seal, Kurama opened one eye. The fight had rattled the bars of the cage, the chakra-on-chakra violence of Kisame's water sphere and the boy's indifference to it had sent vibrations through the seal structure that the fox felt as distant thunder. He had listened to the fight. He had heard the formation hit. He had heard it do nothing. He closed his eye. He went back to sleep. Sleep was the only autonomy left to him. He used it the way a prisoner uses the hours between inspections, greedily, privately, holding each unconscious moment as proof that he still had something that belonged to him alone. Pain's attack on Konoha came on a morning that smelled like rain. The irony was lost on no one. The leader of a Megakure, the village hidden in the rain, sent his god's judgment to a sunny village, and the only rain that day was the rain he brought with him. It came in the form of a Shinra Tensei so powerful that it displaced the atmosphere above the village in a sphere of pure force. The gravitational repulsion expanding outward from a point 300 meters above the center of Konoha, pushing everything away from its epicenter with the force of a small god disagreeing with geography. The blast hit at 6:47 a.m. Naruto was already gone. He had left the night before. He had flown out of the village at sunset, heading north-northeast toward the rain. He had been tracking the Omegakure relay network for 3 weeks, listening to it through the atmosphere, picking up the faint electromagnetic signatures of Pain's chakra receiver transmissions with ears that could hear heartbeats through stone and thunder through countries. He had triangulated the source. He had mapped the relay pattern. He had found Omegakure on a map that did not need to exist because he could see it through the curve of the earth if he went high enough. He arrived over Omegakure at 4 a.m. He circled the city in the clouds, invisible, silent, moving through the cloud layer at an altitude where the rain itself was too thin to reach him. He looked down through the clouds and through the rain and through the rooftops with X-ray vision. He mapped everything. The 6 bodies of Pain were distributed across the city. The Deva path was on the central tower, standing in the rain, arms spread, broadcasting the gravitational field that kept the village's weather system rotating around his will. The Ashura path was on the eastern manufacturing district, its mechanical systems idle, waiting, arms folded into configurations that could deploy into missile arrays in less than a second. The human path walked the streets of the residential quarter, moving among the citizens like a ghost, its hand ready at its side. The animal path was in the underground warren beneath the administrative sector. The hungry ghost path stood guard at the entrance to the deepest tunnel system. The Naraka path was in the chamber below the tower, next to the King of Hell construct. And Nagato, the real Nagato, the source, the broken man behind all of it, was in the ruins at the city's edge. A bunker sealed with 3 layers of barrier ninjutsu, buried in the wreckage of the old industrial quarter. He was in his mechanical throne. The black receivers pierced his body at the spine and the ribs and the shoulders. The Rinnegan burned in his ruined face. Conan was beside him, standing at his shoulder, paper wings half formed at her back, watching the rain through a window that was really just a hole in the wall. Naruto dropped from the clouds. He did not give them time to respond. He came down at terminal velocity, faster than terminal velocity, accelerating under his own power, breaking through the cloud layer like a round fired from heaven. The Asura path was first. He hit it from above, both fists driven into its shoulders from a vertical descent, the full force of his speed and his mass concentrated into a point that went through the mechanical body's armor like a spike through wet clay. The Asura path's arms came off, its torso folded inward. The missile configurations in its forearms detonated inside the collapsed chassis, secondary explosions that blew the remains into fragments that scattered across the rooftop. The Deva path felt the loss. Pain's relay network was instantaneous. The death of one body registered across all the others within 1/100th of a second. The Deva path turned. It reached for the gravitational push. Shinra Tensei, aimed downward, aimed at the shape that was already rising from the eastern district at a speed that should have been impossible. Naruto was already behind it. He had crossed the city in the time between the Deva path's awareness and its response. He was at its back. He took it by both arms. He pulled, the body tore at the torso. The two halves separated with a wet, mechanical sound, tendons and chakra receivers, and the spine all parting at once. He dropped both halves off the tower. They fell into the rain and hit the street below, with sounds that the citizens of Amigakure would hear in their sleep for years. The human path came from the street level, rising from the residential quarter at speed, hand extended, reaching for Naruto's chest with the soul extraction technique already active. The hand hit Naruto's sternum. The technique reached in. It found two souls. It found them looking at it. Inside the seal, behind the bars, Kurama felt the technique arrive. He felt it probe the space. He watched from the deepest part of the prison as two consciousnesses turned toward the invading force with the unified displeasure of roommates, interrupted during dinner. The technique touched the first consciousness, Naruto's, and found it immovable. It touched the second, Homelander's, and recoiled. It withdrew. It came back out of the body the way a burned hand comes back from a flame. The human path staggered. Its hand came back empty. Naruto caught the extended wrist. He snapped the arm at the shoulder. He fired a beam through the back of its skull from 3 inches away. The body dropped. The hungry ghost path rushed him from the tunnel entrance. Mouth open, the absorption field at full output, trying to pull in whatever energy Naruto was using to sustain the flight and the heat vision and the strength. The field opened. It reached for him. It found nothing to absorb. There was no chakra in the boy. There was no natural energy. There was nothing the absorption field recognized as consumable. Naruto hit it once, a palm strike to the center of its chest that caved in the ribcage and drove the body backward through the tunnel entrance and into the wall at the end of the corridor. The impact left a crater in the stone. The body stayed in the wall. The animal path summoned from underground. The earth beneath Naruto's feet erupted. The multi-headed dog came first, rising through the paving stones with 4 heads snapping. Behind it, the bull with drill horns charged from the rubble. Above, the giant drill-beaked bird dove from the rain clouds. Naruto fired into the dogs' mouths. He fired 4 beams at once, 1 per head, and each beam went through the open jaw and through the brain behind it and out the back of the skull. The 4 heads went limp simultaneously. The massive body collapsed sideways into a row of buildings. The bull was mid-charge. Naruto turned and met it with a single straight right hand, a punch that hit the crown of the bull's skull between the horns. The force of the punch went through the skull and into the spine and through the body and out the back. The bull's legs gave out. It slid forward on its face and came to rest at Naruto's feet, the bird dove. Naruto went up to meet it. He caught it by the beak, both hands on the upper and lower mandibles, holding the jaws apart, the wings beating against the rain around them. He looked into the throat. He fired upward through it. The beam went through the throat and through the body cavity and out the back of the creature. The wings stopped beating. He let it fall. The animal path was below him, hands still extended in the summoning posture. He came down. He burned it with a sustained beam through the chest. The Naraka path rose from the ground beside the tower. The king of hell came with it, enormous, rising from the paving stones like a mountain growing in real time. Its mouth opened, the great red mouth, the judgment mouth, the truth extraction opening that had been used to interrogate and condemn and revive for as long as pain had held the Rinnegan. It leaned toward Naruto. It opened wider. The inside of the mouth glowed with the heat of whatever judgment engine lived in its belly. Naruto looked at it. He flew into the mouth. He went inside. The king of hell's mouth closed around him for half a second. Then the red light came from inside. 2 beams burning outward through the back of the construct's skull, boring through the spiritual tissue of the summoned entity, exiting through the crown of its head in 2 smoking trails that climbed into the rain clouds above. The king of hell shuddered. It went rigid. It collapsed, the construct losing cohesion from the top down, dissolving back into the spiritual plane from which it had been summoned, leaving nothing but a shadow on the ground where it had been. Naruto emerged from the dissolving form and landed on the paving stones beside the Naraka path. He reached down. He broke its spine with 2 fingers pressed against the vertebrae at the base of the neck. It went limp. 6 bodies. 6 seconds of real time. The rain of a Megakure fell on a city that had lost its god. Konan came. She came from the rain. She came as the rain, her body dissolving into 1,000 paper forms that rode the wind and the water and the mist. She spread across the sky above the city. The paper ocean opened. 200 billion sheets of paper filled the air between the buildings and the clouds, rotating, layering, building into walls and formations and weapons. Paper shuriken formed by the million. Angel wings, enormous, spanning the gap between 2 tower tops, unfolded at the center of the formation. The dance of Shikigami turned the entire sky over Megakure into Konan's body. She poured everything into it. She knew it would not stop him. She had known before she started. She had watched the 6 bodies fall through the eyes she carried in the paper of the outer rain layer, the sheets she had stationed at every corner of the city for surveillance. She had seen the Deva path torn in half. She had seen the King of Hell killed from inside. She knew. She was buying Nagato 3 minutes. She launched the assault. The paper came from every direction, walls of origami closing inward, shuriken by the 1,000 filling every angle of approach, the wings overhead directing the flow like a conductor directing an orchestra. It was the full output of a lifetime of development. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing anyone in Amigakure had ever seen. Naruto stopped in the air. He hovered at the center of the closing formation. He looked through the paper. He found her, the real Konan, at the center of the formation. The woman behind the ocean, standing on the river surface below with her real body half dissolved into paper, her hands raised, her face tilted toward the sky. He looked at her through the paper. She looked back. He fired. A single expanding pulse, heat vision at full output, wide beam, radiating outward from his eyes in a sphere of red light. The pulse hit the innermost paper first. It ignited. The fire spread outward from the center, eating through the sheets in a ring of flame that expanded at the speed of the pulse itself. The paper ocean burned. It burned from inside out. 200 billion sheets of paper caught fire in a single exhale of red light and went from white to orange to black to nothing in a cascade that filled the sky with ash. The paper became smoke. The smoke filled the rain. The rain carried it down. The city streets were covered in a layer of wet ash that stuck to the stone and the metal and the faces of the citizens who had come to their doors to watch. Konan was standing on the surface of the river below the city. Her wings were gone, burned to stems at her shoulder blades, the remnants smoking in the rain. Her hands were at her sides. Her face was wet. Her eyes were dark and steady and full of the knowledge that she had known this would happen and had done it anyway because the 3 minutes mattered. Naruto came down to her level. He hovered above the river's surface, 6 feet away. He looked at her. He believed in peace, she said. I know, Naruto said. He made it clean. The beam was thin. It was horizontal. It was over in the time between one raindrop and the next. Konan's body went still on the river's surface. The paper that was part of her went still with it. The last few sheets that had been orbiting her hands falling flat onto the water and lying there, wet and done. Naruto turned. He flew toward the ruins at the city's edge. He followed the chakra signature he had mapped from 30,000 feet. He followed it through the destroyed industrial quarter and into the bunker and through the barrier seals, which he walked through without slowing, the way he walked through everything, and into the chamber where Nagato sat. The real Nagato was what the years had made him, thin, ruined, pierced through by his own receivers, seated in a mechanical throne that was the only thing keeping his body upright. His Rinnegan burned in a face that was more skull than skin. His arms were thin enough that the bones showed through. His chest moved with the shallow breathing of a man whose lungs had been arguing with the rest of his body for years. He was looking at the entrance. He had been looking at the entrance since the first body fell. He had felt each one go. He had felt the technique attempts fail. He had felt the King of Hell die. He had felt Conan die. He had felt everything die, and he had sat in his throne and waited for the last thing in his life to walk through the door. Naruto walked through the door. He did not float. He walked. His feet hit the stone floor. His hands were at his sides. His eyes were dimmed. The red at the edges present, but pulled back, held low, not needed. He looked at Nagato with something that was close to curiosity. Nagato looked back. "All I ever wanted was peace," Nagato said. His voice was a whisper, not because he was whispering, but because the voice was all that was left. "I spent my life trying to end the pain of this world. I spent my life trying to build something that could carry peace into the future. I used violence because the world taught me that violence was the only teacher the world listened to." "I know," Naruto said. "I can hear your heartbeat. You mean every word. Then you know I am telling you the truth." "I do." "And does it matter?" Naruto looked at him for a long time. He looked at the Rinnegan, the most powerful dojutsu in the world, burning in a body that could barely sustain itself. He looked at the receivers piercing the man's body. He looked at the throne. He looked at the room, the bunker, the barriers, the wet stone walls, the rain leaking in through the hole where a window used to be. "Do you know how many people I could kill?" Naruto said softly. "All of them. Every single one of them. The difference between you and me is I've decided that's okay." Nagato's Rinnegan flared. The last of what he had, the final reserve, the thing he had been holding since the beginning, gathered behind his eyes. He pushed. Shinra Tensei at point-blank range. The blast went outward from his throne in all directions. The gravitational repulsion hitting everything in the room, hitting the walls, hitting the floor, hitting the ceiling, hitting the boy standing 3 meters away. Naruto stood inside it. The blast passed over him. His jacket pressed back against his chest. His hair blew forward across his face. The rain from the window went sideways. The stone walls of the bunker cracked from the force. The ceiling dropped fragments. The floor buckled. Naruto did not move. The blast passed. He pushed the hair back out of his face. He looked at Nagato. He raised 2 fingers. The beam came out thin. It came out precise. It went through both Rinnegan eyes at once, entering through the pupils, traveling through the orbital sockets, meeting in the center of the brain, and exiting through the back of the skull. The glow in Nagato's eyes went out. The concentric rings of the Rinnegan dimmed to nothing. The mechanical throne powered down. The receivers losing their source, the connections severing, the system going dark. Nagato's head dropped forward onto his chest. His body stayed in the throne, held up by the receivers that still pierced it, suspended like a thing on hooks. The breathing stopped. The rain came in through the window and hit the floor and ran across the stone and pooled around the base of the throne in a puddle that reflected nothing. Naruto stood in the bunker for a long moment. He listened to the silence. He listened to the rain. He listened to the city above him, the citizens in their homes, the heartbeats, the breathing, the sound of a city that had been governed by a man who called himself God. Waking up to the absence of that governance, he turned. He walked out of the bunker. He walked through the barrier seals. He emerged into the rain. He looked up at the sky. The rain hit his face and ran off without soaking him. He flew home. He flew at altitude, above the clouds, above the rain, in the space between the weather and the sky. He flew east. He broke the sound barrier over the land of hot springs, and the boom rattled the resort windows and made a woman in a hot spring drop her sake cup. He flew over the land of fire's western border and descended through the cloud cover over Konoha. The village was damaged. The Shinra Tensei that Pain had launched that morning had hit. The outer ring of the blast had reached the village walls before dissipating, cracking buildings in the western district and collapsing a section of the perimeter wall. The 7 had handled the aftermath. Kakashi had coordinated the evacuation. Sasuke had reinforced the wall with Susanoo. Shikamaru had run the logistics. Kurenai had handled the civilian coordination. Naruto landed on the Hokage Tower. He looked at the damage. He looked at the cracked buildings. He looked at the collapsed wall section. He said, "Fix it." He said it to Sasuke, who was standing behind him on the roof. Sasuke nodded. Naruto went inside. He sat at his desk. He picked up the flask from the drawer. He drank. He closed his eyes. The rain of a Megakure fell on a city with no one left to lead it. The week after Omegakure was quiet, the world was processing. The intelligence networks of every remaining power were running at maximum output. Messengers and hawks encoded radio transmissions filling the airspace between the great nations as the information spread. Akatsuki was functionally destroyed. Pain was dead. Conan was dead. Kasame was dead. Deidara was dead. Sasori was dead. Orochimaru was dead. Kabuto was alive but handless in a laboratory that was on fire. The only remaining operatives of any significance were Itachi Uchiha, who had been last seen heading west, and Zetsu, whose location was unknown but whose threat level was considered negligible without the organization's command structure. Itachi came to Konoha on the 7th day. He came at dawn. He came on foot. He came through the front gate in his Akatsuki cloak, hands visible, weapons sheathed. He looked tired. He looked the way a man looks when the disease inside him has won the argument, and the only question remaining is how the last few pages will read. He asked to be taken to the boy. The gate guards sent word up. Naruto received it in bed. He got up, he dressed, he went to the gate. He flew, but low, barely above the rooftops, coming down at the gate plaza at a pace that was almost lazy. He landed in front of Itachi with his flask in one hand and his hair still messy from the pillow and the morning light making his eyes squint. He looked at Itachi. He looked through him. X-ray vision showed everything. The lungs, already failing, the tissue degraded to a point where every breath was work, the lymph nodes, swollen and dark, the heart laboring harder than it should have been for a man standing still. 3 months, maybe 4 if the man was lucky. And Itachi Uchiha had never once in his life been lucky. "You're dying already," Naruto said. "Yes," Itachi said. "Then why are you here?" Itachi stood in the morning light at the gate of Konoha. He stood in the place he had left 8 years ago with blood on his sword and a brother behind him, and the knowledge that the thing he had done was the worst thing a person could do to themselves. He looked at the boy in front of him, the boy who had taken the world apart with his hands, the boy who had killed every other member of the organization Itachi had spent years inside, the boy who held Itachi's last surviving brother on his team by the force of something that was beyond loyalty and beyond fear and beyond anything Itachi had a word for. "My brother," Itachi said. Naruto drank from his flask. He wiped his lip. He waited. "He is on your team," Itachi said. "He is in your house. He answers to you. I have watched from a distance for 3 years. I have seen the way he moves when you are near. I have seen what your presence has done to the anger in him. It has given it a shape, a direction, a purpose that it did not have when I was the only thing it was aimed at." He paused. "I do not ask you to spare the world. I do not try to appeal to your conscience. I ask for one thing." "What?" "When Sasuke comes for you, and Sasuke will come, because Sasuke always comes, let him live." Naruto looked at him. He held the flask. He drank again. He set the flask on the low wall beside the gate and crossed his arms. "And if I say no, then I fight you," Itachi said. "And I lose, but I fight you." Naruto tilted his head. He studied the man in front of him, the genius, the prodigy, the child who had been given an impossible choice by impossible men and had made the wrong one and spent the rest of his life trying to make the wrong choice count for something. He looked at the disease eating through the man's body. He looked at the 3 months left. He looked at the fact that Itachi had walked here knowing he was going to die and had done it anyway because the walk was the last thing he could do for the person he loved most. "I'll think about it," Naruto said. "But first, show me what you've got. I haven't seen a Sharingan go all out since Danzo." Something changed in Itachi's face. Something that had been held very still for a very long time moved. His Sharingan activated, the 3 Tomoe patterns spinning, the red flooding the black, the Mangekyo forming over it in the 3-pointed shuriken configuration that belonged to him and would die with him. The full Mangekyo Sharingan of Itachi Uchiha, the eyes that had killed a clan, that had ended a war inside a village, that had made Orochimaru run. They lit up. Amaterasu. The black flames ignited on Naruto's chest. They came into existence from the focus point of Itachi's left eye, materializing on the target without crossing the distance, the technique that burned at the temperature of the sun and could not be extinguished by any conventional means. They caught. They spread. They covered Naruto's jacket in a sheet of black fire that ate everything it touched, except it did not eat. The flames burned against the fabric. They hissed. They spread across the surface the way oil spreads across glass, sliding, unable to find purchase, unable to burn through to the body beneath. Naruto's skin rejected the fire the way it rejected everything else, passively, absolutely, with the same indifference it showed to kunai and jutsu and the combined output of an army. The Amaterasu burned on his surface without touching him. Naruto looked down at the black flames on his jacket. He blinked. The flames went with the blink. They went out as his eyelids closed and opened, snuffed by the motion of his lashes, the way a candle goes out when a door opens. The black fire, the technique that nothing in the world could extinguish, went out because Naruto Uzumaki's body decided it was done being on fire. Itachi's left eye bled. The Susanoo came next. It came fast. The red chakra construct rising around Itachi's body in stages, the ribcage first, then the arms, then the skull, then the musculature, then the armor. The full Susanoo, Itachi's version, armed with the Yata mirror in one hand and the sword of Tatsuka in the other. The Yata mirror could reflect any attack. The sword of Tatsuka could seal any target it pierced into an eternal genjutsu dream. Together, they made the Susanoo a construct that had been called invincible by every shinobi who had ever encountered it. It rose to its full height. It stood above the gate of Konoha in the morning light, towering, armored, red and gold, and burning with the last of Itachi's chakra reserves. The sword of Tatsuka extended toward Naruto, a liquid blade, glowing, reaching out. Naruto hit it. He went at the Susanoo from the left side, shoulder first, at speed. He hit the rib cage at the junction between the third and fourth rib. The impact was enormous. The sound of it was a crack that carried across the village. The Susanoo shook. The ribs at the impact site flexed inward under the force. They held. Naruto's eyes widened a fraction. He pulled back. He hit it again. Forearm from the right this time at the shoulder joint. The shoulder cracked. It held. The Susanoo stood. He hit it a third time. A straight punch, dead center, into the breastplate of the armored construct. The breastplate fractured in a spiderweb pattern that radiated outward from the fist. It held. Naruto pulled back. He looked at the Susanoo. He looked at the fracture patterns. He looked at the chakra flow running through the construct, the way it reinforced itself at the points of stress, the way Itachi's will was pouring into the structure to hold it together despite the damage. "Huh," he said. Something in his face changed. Something in his posture shifted. For the first time in a fight since the beginning of this story, he looked interested. He went around. He went to the back of the Susanoo and looked at the construct from behind. He found what he was looking for, the gap between the rib cage and the shoulder joint on the left side, where the armor was thinnest and the chakra flow was weakest, because the Yata mirror was drawing from that channel. A structural compromise, a place where the construct was choosing offense over defense. He fired heat vision into the gap. The beam went through the armor at the weak point and into the interior of the construct. Inside the Susanoo, the beam hit the chakra structure from within. The internal architecture of the construct, the load-bearing lines of force that held it upright, burned from the inside out. The Susanoo shuddered. The fractures in the breastplate widened. The arms went loose. The Yata mirror dispersed. The sword of Tatsuka lost cohesion and melted back into liquid. The construct collapsed inward from the wound point outward, falling apart in sheets of dissipating chakra that rained down over the gate plaza like red snow. Itachi stood at the center of the dissipating construct. His Mangekyo was dim. His breathing was heavy. Blood ran from both eyes and from his nose and from the corner of his mouth. The disease and the chakra expenditure were working together now to take him down. He raised his right hand. He activated Tsukuyomi. The world shifted. The genjutsu took hold, or tried to. It reached into Naruto's consciousness through the eye contact pathway that the technique required. It entered the mindscape. It started to build the 72-hour subjective time world. The red moon, the black sky, the cross, the space where the victim was supposed to be bound and tormented for what felt like 3 days in the span of a second. The technique built the landscape. It raised the moon. It set the cross. It prepared the binding. Then it found the two occupants. Inside Naruto's mindscape, The Tsukuyomi world arrived and unfolded itself in the space between two figures who were already there. Naruto Uzumaki was sitting cross-legged on the sewer floor of his seal space, hands on his knees, looking at the Genjutsu moon overhead the way a man looks at a billboard advertisement he did not ask for. Homelander, the second occupant, the older psyche, the thing that had been here first and longer, stood behind him with his arms crossed and his cape moving in a wind that did not exist in the Tsukuyomi world. They both looked at the technique. The technique looked back. Deep in the seal space, behind bars that the Tsukuyomi had not expected to find, Kurama pressed against the cage floor and watched. The fox saw the two consciousnesses turn toward the Genjutsu with the unified irritation of something being interrupted. He saw the Tsukuyomi world, the red moon, the black sky, and he saw the way the two occupants simply looked at it. The way homeowners look at an intruder who has walked into the wrong house. The red moon cracked. It cracked from the inside out, the Genjutsu construct losing structural integrity as the two minds inside the space refused to participate in the experience. The 72-hour time compression reversed. The binding cross dissolved. The landscape fell apart. The technique was expelled from the mindscape the way a rejected organ is pushed from a body, forcefully, completely, with the clear biological statement that this thing does not belong here. Itachi staggered in real time. The Tsukuyomi backlash hit him like a physical blow. He fell back a step. Blood poured from his eyes. The Mangekyo dimmed to nothing. His vision blurred. He blinked, the normal blink of a man whose eyes are failing, and when the blink was over, Naruto was still standing in front of him, unmarked, undisturbed, with his hands in his pockets and the morning light behind him. The fight was over. Itachi knew it. He straightened his back. He set his hands at his sides. He wiped the blood from his face with his sleeve. He looked at Naruto with eyes that were running out of light. "I showed you what I have," he said. "You did." "And Sasuke?" Naruto was quiet for a long time. He stood in the gate plaza. He listened to Itachi's heartbeat, the way it was slowing, the way the disease was pulling at the edges of it even now, the way the fight had taken months off a body that only had months to begin with. He listened to the gate behind him, the guards, the chunin on duty, the village waking up to sight of a Susanoo being destroyed at their front door. He listened to the village. He listened to Sasuke's pulse somewhere inside it. In the tower, in the office next to his, steady and controlled, and always a little elevated when Naruto was nearby. "I'll think about it," he said. He looked at Itachi. He looked at the man for a long time, at the genius and the brother and the child who had been handed an impossible world and tried to make it survivable for the one person he loved. Naruto raised his hand. He extended it, palm flat, fingers together, the position for a beam. He held it there for a moment. His eyes went red at the edges. Then something crossed his face. Something fast. Something that did not have a name in either of his lives. He fired. It was clean. It was horizontal. It was over in a single breath. The beam went through the center of Itachi's chest, the same spot where the disease was worst, the same spot where the heart was laboring hardest, the same spot where the pain was concentrated. It went through clean and came out the back and dissipated in the morning air behind him. Itachi Uchiha's face went soft. Something in it, the held thing, the carried thing, the weight he had been lifting since the night he had walked out of the Uchiha compound, set itself down. His eyes closed, his knees bent. He folded to the ground in the morning light at the front gate of Konoha, folded the way a man folds when the thing holding him up has finally decided to let go. The crows in the trees took flight. They rose from the branches in a black wave, hundreds of them filling the morning sky, circling once over the body, and then dispersing into the east toward the sunrise. Naruto stood over the body. He stood there for a long time. He did not speak. He did not move. He looked at the face on the ground, peaceful now, in the way that faces become peaceful when the arguments inside them are over. He reached into his jacket. He produced the flask. He poured a measure of milk onto the ground beside the body. He poured it the way a man pours a libation, slowly, watching it pool in the dust beside the dead man's hand. He put the flask away. He turned. He walked back into the village. He did not look back. Behind him, in the cage, the fox was awake. The fox had watched the Tsukuyomi attempt, He had watched the two consciousnesses reject it. He had felt the technique break apart inside the space he shared with them. He had felt the power of the rejection, the absolute refusal from two beings who had never in their combined history been moved by anything entering their mind uninvited. The fox lay down. He put his great head on his paws. He breathed in, he breathed out. He was the oldest thing in this story. He had eaten armies. He had reshaped coastlines. He had been sealed in vessels for centuries. He had never felt as small as he felt in this moment, lying in the dark behind his bars, in a body that had never once needed him, in a life that had moved on entirely without his input. Listening to the heartbeats of a village that his host now owned, Obito Uchiha appeared in the Hokage's office on a Wednesday afternoon. He came out of the Kamui dimension the way he always came, a spiral in the air, reality folding inward to a point and then expanding outward again with a body at its center. The orange mask, the single eye hole, the black cloak, the war fan at his back. The presence of a man who had been behind every curtain in the elemental nations for 20 years, he materialized in the center of the office. Naruto was at his desk. A pen was in his hand. A report was in front of him. The flask was on the desk beside the report. "You've been busy," Obito said. His voice came through the mask with the flattened affect of a man who was used to playing a character and had forgotten, somewhere along the way, where the character ended and the man began. "So have you," Naruto said, without looking up. He finished the sentence he was writing. He set the pen down. He looked up. They looked at each other. Naruto could see through the mask. He had been able to see through the mask since the moment the Kamui spiral had started forming in his office. X-ray vision had mapped the face behind the orange ceramic while the body was still mid-transit between dimensions. He saw the Rinnegan in the left socket, stolen, transplanted, burning with stolen power. He saw the Sharingan in the right, Obito's original, the three Tomoe pattern that had evolved into Mangekyo decades ago. He saw the scarring on the right side of the face. He saw the Hashirama cells woven into the body's infrastructure. "I know who you are," Naruto said pleasantly. "Obito Uchiha, student of the 4th Hokage, the man who released the Nine Tails on the night I was born, the man who set the Uchiha massacre in motion, the architect behind pain, the architect behind the Akatsuki, the invisible hand that has been pushing this world towards something for 20 years. Behind the mask, Obito's visible eye narrowed. "I know everything," Naruto said. "I've known for months. Itachi told me before he died. Shikamaru confirmed it with the intelligence files. I've been waiting for you to show up." He leaned back in his chair. He folded his hands on his chest. "So, what's the pitch?" Obito reached back and drew the war fan, the great gunbai, the Uchiha battle fan, the same one Madara had carried in the last great war, came forward off his back and into his right hand. He held it at his side. He looked the boy behind the desk. "The infinite Tsukuyomi," Obito said. "A world without pain, a genjutsu cast on the moon itself reflected onto the earth, placing every living consciousness into a shared dream where suffering is impossible, where everyone gets the life they wanted, where loss is undone, where death is meaningless because the dream provides what reality refused. And you need me for it. The Nine Tails is the final piece. Without it, the jutsu is incomplete. Without the complete collection of tailed beasts, the jubi cannot be formed. Without the jubi, the tree cannot grow. Without the tree, the moon cannot be lit." Naruto nodded along. He nodded the way a student nods when a teacher is explaining something the student already understood before the teacher started talking. He picked up the flask, he drank, he wiped his lip, he set the flask down. "Nobody tells me what to do," Naruto said. He stood up from the desk. He came around it. He walked toward Obito at a normal walking pace. "Not you, not a moon, not a dream." He stopped 2 meters away. "Especially not a dream." Obito phased. The Kamui took him sideways through reality, his body going intangible from the feet up, the matter of him passing into the pocket dimension that existed between spaces. He was gone from the room. He was everywhere and nowhere. He was untouchable. Naruto tracked him. He saw the dimensional thread. X-ray vision followed the signature of the Kamui pocket the way it followed everything else, as a frequency, a location in space, a disruption in the fabric of the air that was slightly off from where the rest of reality sat. He could see where Obito was inside the pocket. He could see the timing of the transition. The moment the body went intangible, the moment it came back, Obito materialized behind Naruto. The war fan swung at the back of the boy's head, a strike that carried the full weight of the gunbai and the arm behind it, and the 20 years of combat experience that had made Obito Uchiha one of the most dangerous shinobi alive. Naruto turned. He caught the fan. His hand closed around the flat of the blade and stopped it dead. The force of the swing transferred into his arm and dispersed. He looked at Obito through the fingers holding the fan. Obito phased again. He went sideways. Naruto tracked him. Obito came out on the left, war fan already swinging, Rinnegan blazing, the gravitational push of Shinra Tensei already forming in the left eye. He came out swinging and pushing at the same time. Naruto took the gravitational push in the chest. It did what it always did to him. Nothing. The push went around him and blew the desk backward and scattered the papers and sent the flask rolling across the floor. Naruto did not move. He reached for Obito's arm. Obito phased. He went sideways for the third time, dropping into the kamui pocket at the same angle he had used twice before, exiting at the same position, coming out at the predictable point. Naruto's hand was already at that point. He caught Obito at the shoulder during the transition window, the half-second gap between intangible and solid, the moment when the body was becoming real again and could be touched. During that window, a grip applied. The grip applied. Obito's Sharingan went wide. Naruto drove him into the wall. He held him there with one hand. The shoulder pinned against the plaster, the body pressed flat, the war fan trapped between Obito's back and the wall. Obito tried to phase again. The shoulder refused. Naruto was too fast. The grip reset itself every time the kamui tried to activate, catching the transition window, holding through it, refusing to let the phasing begin. "You set all of this in motion," Naruto said. His voice was warm. His voice was always warm. "The fox, my father, the whole thing. You were in the cave when my mother was giving birth. You ripped the 9 tails out of her. You put the beast on the village. My father died because of you. My mother died because of you. I grew up in an orphanage because of you." Obito said the speech. He delivered it with the conviction of a man who had spent 20 years building a belief system from the ruins of a crushed childhood and a dead love. He talked about Rin, the girl who had died on Kakashi's hand. He talked about the world's cruelty. He talked about the impossibility of peace through conventional means. He talked about the dream as the only path that led away from suffering. He talked about the moon as a mirror that could show every person the life they deserved instead of the life they got. He said it with genuine belief. He said it with tears behind the mask that his voice carried even if his face did not show. Naruto listened to the whole thing. Then he said, "I could go wherever I want, do whatever I want, and there isn't a single person on this whole planet that could stop me." He tilted his head. "You think a dream is going to hold me? You think a moon is going to tell me what to see when I close my eyes?" He leaned closer. "I am the most powerful man in the world. I am the most powerful man in the universe. Period. I don't get put in boxes. I don't get dreamed into compliance. I don't get folded into someone else's plan." He held Obito against the wall with one hand. He raised the other. He extended 2 fingers. He pointed them at the mask. "What are you going to do about it?" Naruto said gently. "Huh? What are you going to do about it?" The mask cracked first. The beam came through the ceramic at the bridge of the nose, a thin, precise line that split the orange mask in 2 halves. The halves fell away. Obito's face was exposed. The scarring, the mismatched eyes, the tears still wet on the unscarred cheek. Then the beam went through. It went through the skull at the same point. It went through the brain. It went through the back of the head. It went through the wall behind the head. Obito's body went limp against Naruto's grip. The Rinnegan dimmed. The Sharingan slowed and stopped. The architecture of 30 years of planning came apart in the office of the Hokage Tower on a Wednesday afternoon. Naruto set the body against the wall. He set it neatly, sitting position, legs extended, arms at the sides, the 2 halves of the mask on the floor beside it. He looked at the face. He looked at the eyes, both dimmed now, both still, both done. He went back to his desk. He picked up the flask from where it had rolled. He took a drink. He set it down. He picked up his pen. He picked up a new piece of paper. He looked at the hole in the wall behind where Obito had been sitting. He made a note on the paper. Fix wall. Office. South side. He went back to his paperwork. Zetsu was the last piece. The white Zetsu half was found 3 days later in the root system of the God Tree's remnant, a network of fungal tissue spread through the underground of the Land of Fire like veins through a body. Naruto found it by flying low over the forest and listening for the distinctive frequency of its chakra signature, which he had recorded during Obito's death. The faint connection between the masked man and the thing that had been manipulating him. He burned the root system out with sustained heat vision, starting at the center and moving outward in concentric circles, the beam going through the earth at an angle that incinerated the fungal tissue without disturbing the topsoil above it. The process took 20 minutes. The smoke came up through the ground in columns that the farmers in the area mistook for hot springs venting. The black Zetsu half, the will of Kaguya, the ancient manipulator, the thing that had been whispering behind every war and every betrayal for 1,000 years, emerged from the last intact section of root system in a panic. It came up through the earth like an oil slick, spreading across the grass in a thin black film, trying to find a host, trying to find a body, trying to find anything it could attach to and use. Naruto was hovering above it. He looked down at it, at the thin, spreading stain on the grass, the thing that had called itself the Mother's Will, the thing that had set the Uchiha against the Senju and the villages against each other and the world against itself for a millennium. See, he said, nobody loves you, nobody needs you. He fired down. He fired at full output, the beam hitting the black substance at the center and expanding outward in a ring of heat that burned the grass and the dirt and the root system and the thing itself into a flat circle of scorched earth. The black Zetsu screamed. It screamed with a voice that did not come from a mouth because it did not have a mouth. A frequency, a vibration in the air, a sound that was older than language. The sound stopped. The stain was gone. The grass around the circle was still smoking. Naruto landed. He looked at the scorched earth. He looked at the clean circle of burned ground and the forest around it and the sky above it. He flew home. Sasuke came for him on a night that had no moon. He came over the walls. He came in the dark. He came with 3 years of preparation compressed into his body and his technique and his will and the Mangekyo spinning in both eyes with the full depth of everything he had built since the sparring ring. He cleared the village wall at the northeastern corner. He moved across the rooftops at a speed that the night patrols could not track. He reached the Hokage Tower. He went to the roof. Naruto's voice came from inside the building before Sasuke's foot was flat on the tile. I know you're up there. Sasuke breathed. He breathed in through his nose and out through his mouth and felt the Mangekyo settle in his eyes and felt the chakra in his system stabilize and felt the cold air of the moonless night against his face. He went in through the window. The office was dark. The desk lamp was off. The only light came from the red at the edges of Naruto's eyes, the dull glow, always present, always banked, casting a faint red wash across the desk and the papers in the walls. Naruto was leaning back in his chair. His feet were on the desk. The flask was in his hand. He was looking at the window. Sasuke had just come through. I've been practicing, Sasuke said. Naruto set down his flask. He leaned forward. He took his feet off the desk. He stood. He came around the desk. He walked to the window. He looked at Sasuke, at the Mangekyo, at the posture, at the readiness in the body, at the way the chakra was flowing through the Uchiha system at peak output already. He smiled. It was the real smile. The first real smile of the night. The first real smile in a long time. Good, he said. They went through the window together. Naruto went first, rising through the frame and up, going vertical, going high. Sasuke followed. Body flickered to the rooftop. Then the Susanoo wings deployed, the incomplete armor forming around his body in a rush of purple-blue chakra that lit the dark rooftop like a torch. He went up after Naruto. He went up fast. They met in the sky above Konoha. They met in the dark air with the village below them and the stars above them and the empty space between. The wind hit them at altitude, cold, fast, carrying the smell of the forest and the cooking fires of the village below. Sasuke opened with a Materasu. The black flames ignited on Naruto's face, directed at the eyes, aimed to blind, aimed to take the heat vision offline at the source. The flames caught on the corneas. They burned against the surface of the eyes the way they had burned against the jacket in the fight with Itachi. Sliding, unable to find purchase, hissing against the invulnerability like water on a hot pan. Naruto blinked. The flames went out. "Your brother tried that," he said. "My brother didn't try this." Sasuke activated the full Susanoo. The complete form, his version, sharper than Itachi's, more aggressive, built for offense. The construct rose around him in layers: ribcage, arms, skull, musculature, armor. The purple-blue giant stood in the sky above Konoha with its wings spread and the sword of Kusanagi in its right hand, the legendary blade, extended to its full length, glowing with Sasuke's chakra. The sword came down. Sasuke drove it at Naruto's chest with everything the Susanoo had. The full force of the armored construct's physical strength behind a blade that had cut through mountains in legend. The blade hit Naruto's chest. The tip of the sword struck the fabric of his jacket at the sternum. It stopped. The Susanoo's arm shook with the arrested momentum. The blade pressed against Naruto's body. It pressed harder. Sasuke poured more chakra into the strike. The blade bent. The tip curved sideways against the surface it could not penetrate. Sasuke pulled it back and adjusted. Naruto hit the Susanoo. He came from the right side, forearm first, at a speed that the Mangekyo tracked but could not react to in time. The forearm hit the Susanoo's ribcage at the junction of the third and fourth rib. The impact shook the construct. Cracks appeared at the impact site, Sasuke reinforced. Chakra flooded the cracks. They sealed. He hit back. The Susanoo's left fist coming at Naruto from the side, a sweep that carried the force of a building being thrown. Naruto caught it. He caught the Susanoo's fist in his right hand, his fingers wrapping around the chakra construct's knuckles, holding the punch in midair. The Susanoo's arm strained against the grip. It could not advance. Naruto hit the Susanoo again, open palm, from below, driving upward into the chin of the armored skull. The construct's head snapped back. Cracks radiated from the jaw. The armor at the neck fractured. Sasuke dropped the Susanoo. He dropped out of it, letting the construct dissolve around him, falling free, channeling the Chidori in his right hand as he fell. The lightning screamed to life. The sound of 1,000 birds. The blue-white arc of concentrated electrical chakra running from his palm to his elbow. He came at Naruto in free fall with the Chidori aimed at the ribs. The Chidori hit. The lightning ran over Naruto's body, up his arm, across his chest, down his legs, dispersing into the air around him in arcs of blue-white energy that lit the dark sky like flashbulbs. The technique did nothing to the body it hit. The skin refused the current. The organs beneath refused the disruption. Naruto grabbed the arm, sending the Chidori. He twisted. Sasuke went sideways, his body following the torque, spinning out and away. He caught himself in midair with the Susanoo wings. He reformed. He was bleeding from the mouth. Susanoo feedback, the cost of dropping the construct mid-use. He wiped the blood with the back of his hand. He did not stop. He went for Kirin. He reached upward, both hands, channeling the lightning nature from his chakra into atmosphere above them. The clouds that were not there began to form, pulled together by the technique, condensed from the moisture in the air, darkened by the electrical charge being pumped into them. The sky above Konoha went from clear to overcast in 8 seconds. Lightning began to arc between the forming clouds. Sasuke shaped it. He pulled the natural lightning down, shaped it into the form of a beast, the Kirin, the dragon horse of myth. The construct formed above them, a bolt of pure natural electricity given shape and direction by Sasuke's will. It was not his chakra. It was real lightning, shaped by him but powered by the sky itself. The output exceeded anything a human body could produce. He dropped it. Kirin fell from the sky like the fist of a god. It hit Naruto's center mass. The flash was visible from 3 countries away. The thunder that followed was heard in the land of wind. The electrical discharge arced from Naruto's body into the ground below, splitting into a dozen secondary bolts that struck the forest and the training grounds and the village walls, leaving scorched paths through the air. The ionized cloud cleared. Naruto stood in the air. His hair was standing up. His jacket was smoking at the edges. Static electricity ran over his skin in visible arcs that faded as they traveled to his extremities. He adjusted his collar. "Okay," he said. He was smiling. He was smiling wide, the full smile, the one that went past the boundaries of what a smile should be, the one that made his face split open into something younger and older at the same time. The smile of someone who has finally found the thing that fits the shape of the space inside his chest. That was actually pretty good. Sasuke's eyes were burning. The Mangekyo was at full output, both eyes spinning, the pattern bright, the chakra behind them reaching its peak. He reached for the last thing, the biggest thing, the technique he had built for this moment, the one he had spent 3 years charging, 3 years shaping, 3 years preparing for the single fight that would determine whether he walked away standing or on his back. Indra's arrow, the technique formed around his arm. The purple-blue lightning condensed, denser than Kirin, hotter than Kirin, compressed to a point that was almost solid. The output of a god's technique, channeled through a Mangekyo Sharingan at peak capacity. The most powerful offensive technique Sasuke Uchiha would ever produce. Inside the seal, Kurama felt it forming. The fox pressed further back into the corner of his cage. The bars were rattling. The technique's output was so massive that the vibrations reached the seal through the boy's body. Kurama pushed himself as far from the front of the cage as the space allowed. He put his tails over his face. He waited. Sasuke fired. Indra's arrow left his hand in a single blinding line of purple-white light. It crossed the distance between them at the speed of lightning, because it was lightning, shaped and compressed and given more power than any lightning bolt in nature carried. It hit Naruto with the full force of a god's inheritance concentrated into a single point. Naruto caught it. He caught it with both hands. He caught it the way a man catches a thrown ball, hands forward, fingers spread, receiving the force into his palms. The arc of the technique ran up his arms. It ran around his neck. It ran into the sky above him, through his hair, and through the air around his shoulders. The overload lit him up from inside, every part of his body glowing with the purple-white light of absorbed electricity, silhouetted against the dark sky like a figure drawn in lightning, arms spread, eyes supernova bright, every window in Konoha rattling in its frame from the resonance alone. The village below watched. The people in the streets, the ones who had come out at the sound of the thunder, looked up and saw the figure in the sky holding a god's bolt in his bare hands and glowing with the light of it. They saw him for what he was. They saw him in his full shape. They saw the thing that had been living among them for 12 years, and the sight of it was the kind of thing that went into temples and stayed there for generations. The overload passed. The light dimmed. Naruto's arms came down. His hands opened. The bolt was gone, absorbed, dispersed, scattered into the atmosphere above him in a corona of fading arcs. He looked at Sasuke. Sasuke was breathing hard. His Mangekyo was dimming, the pattern slowing, the spin losing speed, the chakra behind the eyes running dry. He was out. He had burned everything. The Susanoo was ash. The Chidori was spent. The Kirin was gone. Indra's arrow was gone. He had thrown a career's worth of genius at the boy across from him, and the boy had caught the last and biggest piece of it with his bare hands and glowed. He was done. Naruto crossed the distance in half a breath. He was in front of Sasuke, close, within arm's reach, the heat from his eyes warming the air between them. He caught Sasuke by the lapel. He held him there in the sky. Sasuke's feet hung. His weight was in Naruto's grip. Naruto looked at him. He looked at the face, the exhausted face, the Mangekyo dimming, the blood at the mouth, the sweat in the hair, the absolute commitment that was still in the eyes even as the technique behind them went dark. "I told you," Naruto said softly, "years ago, in that training ring." He tilted his head. The smile was gentle now, a different temperature from the earlier one, something that lived in a warmer place. "Someone smart and angry to stand to my left." Sasuke breathed. He breathed through his nose. He looked at the hand on his lapel, the hand that could crush him, the hand that could end him, the hand that had chosen not to do either for 3 years running. He looked at the city below them. He looked at the sky above them. He had built a mountain to climb. The mountain had turned out to be air, and he was still alive. And the hand holding him was not squeezing. He looked at Naruto. He looked at him for a long time. A long, honest time. The kind of time that only happens between two people who have tested each other past the point where pretending is possible. Then Sasuke Uchiha kneeled. He kneeled in the air, his body going down, one knee forward, head dropping, the posture of surrender and fealty, and the recognition that the fight was over and had been over for 3 years. And the only thing that had changed tonight was that Sasuke had finally run out of ways to pretend otherwise. Naruto looked down at him. He said nothing. He nodded once. He offered his hand, palm down, fingers extended. Sasuke took it. His hand, the hand that had held Chidori, that had gripped the Susanoo sword, that had shaped Kirin and aimed Indra's arrow, closed around Naruto's fingers and held. The grip was firm. The grip was real. The grip said, "I am here. I am staying. The fighting is done." Naruto pulled him up. They stood together in the dark air above Konoha with the stars wheeling overhead and the village settled below and the wind carrying the last of the thunder away to the east. "Welcome back," Naruto said. Sasuke stood at his left. The world after was quieter than the world before. The Kage submitted their formal written surrender to Konoha 2 weeks after the fight above the village. The letters came by official courier, stamped, sealed, signed in ink that meant something. Onoki's came first. The old man was nothing if not efficient when efficiency served survival. His SEAL teams had already arrived in Konoha, working through the archives of Uzumaki Kushina's files, cleaning up the barrier seal work that had been left incomplete when she died. Mei's came second. Her bloodline council was forming in Kirigakure, the hunted clans being named and seated one by one, the purge era being dismantled with the speed of a woman who understood that compliance bought survival. A's surrender came third. It came signed by Killer B on A's behalf. A's hand still did not have the grip for a brush. The fourth Raikage sat in his office with his rebuilt legs, slower now, looking at the window and the letter from Konoha pinned to his wall every morning. He signed the documents he was sent because there was nothing else to do. Killer B ran Kumogakure. He rapped about it. He rapped at council meetings and on mission briefs and during diplomatic visits. Nobody told him to stop because nobody could, and because the village under his management ran with the smooth efficiency of a man who had spent his entire life holding himself together through discipline and rhythm. Gaara's letter came last. It came not as a surrender, but as a statement. Brief, formal, acknowledging the new order without submission. The language was careful. It recognized Naruto's authority without using the word obey. It acknowledged the hierarchy without calling it domination. It was written in Gaara's own hand, the careful, even strokes of a man who had learned penmanship late in life because his hands had been weapons first and tools second. Naruto read it at his desk. He smiled when he finished it. He folded it and put it in the drawer with the flask. Gaara sent monthly letters after that. Reports on Suna's reconstruction. Updates on the wind season food supplies. Observations about the changing behavior of the desert trade routes now that the power structure had shifted. Small, clear, honest letters from a man who had accepted the shape of the world and was doing his best to keep his people alive inside it. Naruto read them. He did not always respond. When he did respond, the letters were brief, 2 or 3 sentences, addressing something specific that Gaara had raised, answering a question that Gaara had asked, or noting something he had seen from the air on his latest pass over the land of wind. Once, he wrote back a single line. The difference between you and me was always just one person who didn't let go. He did not sign it. He did not need to. Gaara folded the letter and put it in the center drawer of his desk, and every morning when he opened the drawer for his seal stamp, he saw it there, and every morning it meant the same thing. Hiruzen Sarutobi lived out his days in the Hokage Tower's east wing. He had a corner office with a window that looked out over the academy courtyard. He could hear the students from his desk, the shouts during sparring, the thud of practice kunai hitting targets, the voice of whatever instructor was running drills that morning. He signed the documents Naruto put in front of him. He wore the hat. He took the meetings with foreign envoys. He smiled for the council. He had been given a choice at the start, in the sky above the clouds, with his lungs refusing and his robes flapping and the ground coming up faster than thinking. He had made the choice. He lived in the choice now. The thing that surprised him most, the thing that he turned over in his mind during the long afternoons when the paperwork was done and the pipe was lit and the window was open to the evening air, was that the boy ran the village well, better than well. The missions ran on time. The infrastructure ran smoothly. The academy had been overhauled. The curriculum personally rewritten by Naruto in the first month, the portions about ninja codes of honor removed and replaced with material about loyalty and the consequences of its absence. The students adapted. Students always adapted. They learned the new curriculum the way students learned everything, without questioning the hand that wrote it, because the hand that wrote it was still above them and still watching. Hiruzen smoked his pipe. He looked out the window. He watched his grandson, Konohamaru, now 14, cross the courtyard below with a pack of friends, laughing at something one of them had said. The boy was growing up in whatever world Hiruzen had left behind for him. The boy seemed happy. The boy seemed safe. Hiruzen did not know if that was a victory or a failure. He had given up trying to decide. He smoked his pipe. He signed his papers. He went home at night and slept in a bed that was his and dreamed of a sky that was no one's. Sasuke stood to Naruto's left in every public appearance. He did not smile for the crowd. He did not need to. The Mangekyo behind his eyes, recovered now, rested, returned to its full output in the months since the fight, communicated everything that needed to be communicated to anyone thinking about acting out. He was the blade at the captain's hip. He was the price of rebellion made visible. He was the reminder that even the strongest opposition this world could produce had bent in the end and chosen to stand where it was told to stand. He attended the meetings. He reviewed the mission reports. He ran the Anbu in Kakashi's absence. Kakashi had been moved to a training position at the academy because Naruto valued his teaching more than his blade, and because Kakashi had accepted the assignment with the visible relief of a man who had been fighting since he was a child and was grateful to stop. Sasuke ran the operations. He ran them well. He ran them with the ruthless efficiency of a man who had found the thing he was supposed to do with the anger that had defined his whole life. He stood to Naruto's left. He stood there in the council chamber and on the rooftop during addresses and in the field during inspections and at the table during meals. He stood there because it was where he had been told to stand, and because the fight was over, and because the hand that had held him in the sky had not squeezed. At night, in the quarters adjoining the Hokage office, Sasuke lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the building around him. He could hear Naruto in the next room, the soft sound of movement, the clink of the flask cap, the creak of the chair, the pulse, always the pulse, steady, even, unchanged by anything. Sasuke listened to it the way a soldier listens to the breathing of the person on watch. He let it tell him that the world was still holding together. He slept. Shikamaru ran the intelligence network. He did it from a desk in the tower's 3rd floor, surrounded by maps and reports and the accumulated output of every spy the village had in every country. He was the brain. He had always been the brain. The difference now was that the brain served something that did not need to think, and the service of it had given the brain a paradoxical peace. Because for the first time in Shikamaru Nara's life, the thinking he did mattered to someone who could actually use it. He sent reports up to Naruto every morning. He received instructions back within the hour. The instructions were brief, clear, and correct in ways that Shikamaru found irritating to admit. The boy could see through walls and hear heartbeats from kilometers away, and the intelligence that produced was better than anything Shikamaru's network could generate. Shikamaru's role was confirmation, cross-reference, the satisfaction of a second source. He did it well. He went home at night to a father who was still alive because Shikamaru had said yes on the first day, and the still being alive of his father was the only proof Shikamaru needed that compliance had been the right strategy. Kurenai trained the next generation. She had been moved from the Seven's active roster to the training corps after the first year. Her genjutsu expertise redirected toward developing the academy's advanced curriculum. She worked with the Genin hopefuls. She taught them to see through illusions and to build their own. She taught them the principles of mind work that Naruto valued in his operatives. She was pregnant. Asuma's child, Asuma, who had died on a mission during the old administration, before the new order, before the boy had taken the sky. The child would grow up in the world Naruto had built. Kurenai did not know what to feel about that. She did not try to feel anything about it. She taught her classes. She went home. She grew her child. She lived. Neji Hyuga ran the perimeter security. His Byakugan, the most powerful of his generation, monitored the village walls and the surrounding territory in shifts that he managed with the kind of discipline only a man raised under the branch house seal could understand. He had been freed from the seal in the second month of the new administration. Naruto had looked at him during a routine briefing, seen the seal through his skin with X-ray vision, and said, "Take that off him." The Hyuga elders had complied within the day. The seal had been removed by a team that included Hiyashi Hyuga himself, who had performed the removal with hands that did not quite shake, but did not quite hold still either. Neji worked the perimeter. He worked it well. He worked it with the grateful efficiency of a man who had been freed from a cage he had been born in, and who understood, with complete clarity, that the freedom had been given by someone who could take it back at will. Hina still poured the flask every morning. She did it at 6 a.m., before the sunrise, before her daughter was awake, before the village outside her window was anything more than the blue-gray shapes of buildings in the pre-dawn light. She filled the flask from the morning supply. She set it on the kitchen table. She waited. He came at 6:15. He came through the door. He sat at her kitchen table the way he had sat at her kitchen table for 5 years, hands folded, eyes on the flask, the smile already forming at the edges of his mouth. She poured the glass. She set it in front of him. She stepped back. She looked at something in the middle distance, the wall, the window, the pattern in the wood of the kitchen shelf, while he drank. He drank the way he always drank. 2 hands, eyes closed, shoulders down, the sigh afterward, long, soft, genuine, the wipe of the upper lip with the thumb, the smile. Her daughter was 11 now. The girl had been 3 months old when the arrangement had started. She had grown up knowing this as a normal thing, a man at the table in the early morning, the flask, the payment, the quiet. She did not ask about it. Children did not ask about things that had always been true. They accepted them the way they accepted weather. Hina took the money. She nodded. She watched him leave. She locked the door. She made breakfast for her daughter. She lived her life in the margins of his, and the margins were warm and well paid. And the thing that visited her kitchen every morning was a thing she had made her peace with in the way that people make peace with things they cannot change and survive. The world called it the Office of the Divine Protector. The daimyo's nephew had used those words first in the letter he had sent after his uncle's death, the letter with the tribute of gold and the personal apology. The words had stuck. They had been picked up by the bureaucrats of the Land of Fire's central administration. They had been adopted by the trade guilds and the merchant councils and the civilian government. They had spread to the other nations through the treaty documents, the formal language of the surrender agreements, using the phrase as the standard designation for the authority that sat above the cog system, the Office of the Divine Protector. It had stationery. It had a seal, designed by Shikamaru, a stylized eye with red at the edges, set above the leaf of Konoha. It had a staff. It had a budget. It had a correspondence system and a filing protocol and all the bureaucratic infrastructure that power acquires when it stays in one place long enough for paperwork to form around it. Naruto paid no attention to any of it. He signed what was put in front of him. He made decisions when decisions were needed. He flew to trouble spots when trouble occurred, which was increasingly rare because the world had learned through the accumulation of bodies and broadcasts in burned cities that trouble in the Divine Protector's territory was trouble that ended quickly and badly for everyone involved. He ran the village. He ran the country. He ran through the treaties and the fear and the memory of what he had done to a 5,000-man army in 90 seconds. The world. He did it from a desk. He did it from a chair. He did it with a flask in his hand and a pen in his other hand, and the window opened to the village below. On a morning that looked like every other morning, Naruto sat in the Hokage office. The desk was clean. The reports were filed. The flask was full, filled 20 minutes ago at Hina's kitchen table, warm against his fingers through the metal. The window was open. The breeze came in from the south, carrying the smell of the ramen stands and the market stalls and the cooking fires of the residential district, and the faint green smell of the training fields beyond the wall. He could hear every heartbeat in Konoha from this chair. He could hear the academy students doing kata in the courtyard, the synchronized slap of hands against thighs as they moved through the forms. He could hear a couple arguing 2 blocks east, the man's voice rising, the woman's voice cutting back, the rhythm of a disagreement that would resolve itself by lunch. He could hear Sasuke's pulse in the next room, steady, controlled, and always a little elevated when Naruto was nearby, which Naruto found privately amusing and would never mention. He could hear Hiruzen's pipe smoke in the east wing, the old man lighting up, the crackle of tobacco, the soft exhale. He could hear Neji's Byakugan activating on the perimeter wall, the faint hum of the dojutsu engaging, the rotation of the vision sweep. He could hear Shikamaru's pen moving across paper 3 floors below, the scratch of ink, the pause of thought, the scratch again. He could hear the village, his village. He looked out the window. He looked at the rooftops and the streets and the smoke rising from the market district and the training grounds beyond the wall and the forest beyond that and the sky above it all. Clear open, blue in every direction he turned. His sky, he picked up the flask. He poured into the crystal glass. He held it in both hands, the way he always held it. 2 hands, thumbs meeting at the front. The warmth of it against his palms, he drank. He closed his eyes. His shoulders settled. His feet, which had been off the floor since he sat down, came down onto the rung of the chair, the way they always came down, the way gravity always found him in this moment, the only moment in any day where his body agreed to be heavy. He held the milk in his mouth. He let it sit there, warm and whole in his. He swallowed. He wiped his upper lip with his thumb. He sighed. He smiled. He opened his eyes. His eyes went red at the edges. Slow, warm, permanent. The color of something that had decided it was done arriving and had started, finally, to simply be. The red was not anger. The red was not heat. The red was presence. The red was the visible frequency of a man who had taken everything there was to take and had found, at the bottom of it, the only thing he had ever wanted. He looked out the window at the village below, at the nations beyond it, at the world that had run out of ways to be anything other than his. They love me, he said softly. He said it to no one. He said it to everyone. He said it to the village below and the office around him and the flask in his hand and the red at the edges of his eyes. They really love me. Inside the seal, deep in the dark behind the bars, Kurama lay still. The fox was awake. He had been awake for the last hour, listening to the morning routine, listening to the walk to Hina's house, listening to the flask being filled and the walk back and the settling into the chair. He listened now to the words. He heard them the way he heard everything the boy said, from a distance, through the water of the seal, muffled by the layers of imprisonment that separated him from the world outside. They love me. They really love me. The fox put his head on his paws. He breathed out through his nose, a long, slow exhalation that moved nothing and disturbed nothing and reached no one. He was the oldest thing in this story. He had lived 1,000 years. He had been sealed in bodies that feared him and bodies that fought him, and one body that had tried to befriend him in another timeline, in another version of events that would never happen now. He was in a cage inside something that had never once acknowledged him. The silence between them had become a thing he had made his peace with, in the way that old things make peace with conditions they cannot change and cannot outlast and cannot fight. He closed his great red eyes. Outside the seal, in the chair, in the office, in the village, in the world, the boy with the red eyes and the flask and the smile sat in the morning light and listened to the sound of everything he owned. The sound was steady. The sound was even. The sound was his.
If that didn't just break your brain, good. Drop a like, subscribe, and come back because this story is nowhere near done. The Nine Tails is scared, Konoha is cooked, and this man hasn't even started yet.